Call the meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the September 17th, 2019 Post Falls City Council meeting. Our stand-in clerk, our short-timer, Deborah Raymer, who is retiring after a lot of years and will be sorely missed, but is filling in for our clerk, who is out of town. But Deborah, you wouldn't like me to say this, but I want to say it publicly. Thank you for all you've done for us. You've been a tremendous asset to the city. So
you're welcome.
You will
Thank
be,
you for the experience,
you
sir.
will be missed. And Deborah will note, please, that all council members are present, not presents, but present.
We're presents too.
I would like to announce we have 3 public hearings scheduled, but there's actually going to be an amendment to the agenda in a minute for a 4th, and we'll announce that in a minute. But if anybody does wish to testify in any of the public hearings, there are forms on the podium in the back, and please bring them up to Deborah. We do have a couple of announcements and 2 proclamations. Coffee with the Cop, Thursday, September 19th from 9 to 10:30 at Gross Donuts, 1603 East Celtice Way. Stop by and meet some of our police officers. You can ask questions, voice concerns, and just get to know them. Wednesday, September 25th at 5:30 p.m., there will be a joint workshop with City Council and Planning and Zoning Commission on the Comprehensive Plan Update. This workshop will be held at the Police Department in the Community Development Room, located at 1717 East Polston Avenue. And she didn't want us to say this either, but since she's gone, we can. Our city clerk, Shannon Howard, has completed the requirements to become certified as a municipal clerk for the state of Idaho. So congratulations to Shannon. And the deputy treasurer, Randy Bain, has completed the requirements to become certified as a municipal clerk treasurer for the state of Idaho. And congratulations to Randy as well. And 2 proclamations. The first is Constitution Week 2019. Whereas September 17th, 2019 marks the 232nd anniversary of the drafting of the Constitution of the United States of America by the Constitutional Convention, and whereas it is fitting and proper to accord official recognition to this magnificent document and its memorable anniversary, and to the patriotic celebration which will commemorate the occasion. And whereas Public Law 915 guarantees the issuing of a proclamation each year by the President of the United States designating September 17th through 23rd as Constitution Week. Now therefore I, Ronald G. Jacobson, Mayor of the City of Post Falls, do hereby proclaim the week of September 17th through 23rd as Constitution Week, and ask our citizens to reaffirm the ideals the framers of the Constitution had in 1787 by vigilantly protecting the freedoms guaranteed to us through this guardian of our liberties, remembering that lost rights may never be regained. Dated the 17th of September. The second is an International Ataxia Awareness Day 2019. Whereas the National Ataxia Foundation strives to meet the goals of location of patients and persons at risk, NAF encourages a complete neurological examination to make early and correct diagnoses. Increased awareness about ataxia, NAF assures that accurate information about ataxia will be available through a variety of educational programs for physicians, allied health officials, and the public. Prevention of the spread of these disorders, NAF encourages genetic counseling to help affect individuals and families make informed decisions about family planning and research. In addition to its own research efforts, NAF supports those research projects that are designed to better understand pathology and causes of ataxia, or to institute new treatments based upon scientific data. NAF helps coordinate research efforts into the causes and early detection of ataxia through existing centers throughout the world. Whereas as many as 150,000 individuals are affected by hereditary and sporadic ataxia in the United States, and whereas ataxia is often a fatal, degenerative neurological disorder that affects balance, coordination, and speech. Whereas ataxia can strike anyone at any time without regard to age, gender, race, or creed. Whereas there is no known cure, the only defense is research and prevention through education. Now therefore I, Ronald G. Jacobson, Mayor of the City of Post Falls, Idaho, do hereby proclaim September 25th, 2019 as International Ataxia Awareness Day in Post Falls, Idaho, and urge all citizens to honor and support those individuals with ataxia and their caregivers in the hope that a cure will soon be found. Dated the 17th of September. Ataxia is spelled A-T-A-X-I-A. And the reason that I agreed to read that proclamation is it's one of those where there are not that many people that have the disease. As a result, the research for it is funded at probably a lower rate than we would like to see. I have a niece who has another disease that has the same thing. There's no known cure, and all research for that is done through private funding for research. So when I see a situation or a case like this, I like to announce it and make sure people are aware of it. I had never heard of this disease before, but our thoughts and prayers are with those that have it, and hopefully research will soon provide a cure for such a debilitating disease. And tonight we do need an amendment to the agenda. Warren, do you want to explain that, please?
Sure. So we have a public hearing tonight that was scheduled for tonight for a subsequent user fee for a sewer line that was installed some time ago. The notice was sent out properly, however, it didn't get on the agenda for tonight. We had some folks coming in from out of state to testify at the hearing, so we thought it was better to amend the agenda so that we could take public testimony from the folks that were here and received the notice. We can't take final action on it because it wasn't on the agenda. We'll have to continue the hearing until the next meeting, when this matter will come back as a continued hearing, and then the final decision would be rendered at the next meeting.
So at the next meeting, we just reopen?
Yes, we'd reopen the hearing at the next meeting. It's a live hearing until then, and then we'll reconvene the hearing in 2 weeks and take final action at that point.
Okay, so we will entertain comments and input tonight?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Linda, you have an amendment?
I move to amend the City Council agenda to include the public hearing for State Highway 41 Sewer Hope to Prairie subsequent user fee, including that the hearing will be continued until 6 p.m. August 1st, 2019, at which time council may take final deliberation and action on the item. The public hearing was posted in the Coeur d'Alene Press. However, it was inadvertently omitted from the council agenda.
We need a correction on the date.
Yes, October 1st.
October. Okay.
Oh, October 1st.
Okay,
Excuse
thank
me.
you.
I'll second it.
So we had a motion. We have a second?
Second.
Second. Thank you, Kerri. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Thoreson,
Aye.
Wolfe,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Anthony,
Aye.
Borders,
Aye.
and Wilhelm.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Shelley, would you present the consent calendar, please?
Item A is August 27th, 2019, City Council Workshop. Item B is minutes from the September 3rd, 2019 City Council meeting. Item C is minutes from the September 11th, 2019 City Council Workshop. Item D is payables, August 27th to September 9th, 2019. Item E is the Master Development Agreement for the Green Meadows subdivision. Item F is the BLM East Green Acres easement vacation. Item G is High Oaks Industrial Subdivision Construction Improvement Agreement. And that is it.
Any questions on the consent calendar?
Move to approve the consent calendar as presented.
Second?
Motion second. Further discussion? Deborah, please take the roll.
Malloy,
Aye.
Wolfe,
Aye.
Thoreson,
Aye.
Anthony,
Aye.
Borders,
Aye.
Wilhelm.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next up are public hearings. The first public hearing tonight is the Bell Cielo 3 LLC annexation. Jamie, I'll open the public hearing.
Good evening, Mayor, Council President Wilhelm, council members. My name is Jamie Hayes, and I am here to present the Bell Cielo 3 LLC annexation, case file ANNX-7-2019. The owner is Bell Cielo 3 LLC. The applicant is Lake City Engineering, Inc. City Council is being asked to review the annexation request of approximately 4.84 acres and to make a decision of approval or denial of the proposed high-density multifamily residential R3 zoning designation. Here you can see the subject site is hatched in red. It's just on the south side of East 16th Avenue, which is a major collector, approximately a quarter mile away from Highway 41, which is a principal arterial and a major commercial corridor. To the south and then to the east is in Kootenai County. It's designated as high-density multifamily. And then directly to the east, or to the west, pardon me, is the Bel Cielo Phase 1 and Bel Cielo Phase 2, which is currently under construction. The current land use is designated as agricultural by Kootenai County. It's vacant with no significant topology or vegetation issues. The water provider is Ross Point Water District, and the sewer provider is the City of Post Falls. The Planning and Zoning Commission made a recommendation of high-density R3 zoning based on the 6 criteria that you can find in more detail in your staff report. Just a quick review is it consistent with the future land use map? Is it consistent with the goals and policies found in the comprehensive plan? And that zoning is assigned following considerations such as street classifications, existing development, future land uses, etc. And that high-density residential zoning is typically assigned along streets with higher road classifications. Some of the residential policies that are consistent within the comprehensive plan are that multifamily conventional zones should be applied in areas that have access to arterial and collector streets and that may serve as a buffer between lower density residential neighborhoods. And that most ordinary activities should occur within walking distance of most residences, allowing a measure of independence for those who do not drive. And that throughout the community, a range of housing types and price levels should be provided to accommodate diverse ages, incomes, and to provide effective, affordable housing. In this slide, you can see the subject site is in orange at the top. In the black hatch is the first and second phase of the Bel Cielo multifamily apartments. What you see in blue is the CityLink bus route B, and this slide is to illustrate the proximity to the bus route. This is the surrounding zoning. What you see in orange is designated as R3, which is high density. To the south, we have R1, single-family residential, a commercial corridor, all in red, and then we have some medium density in the orange across the highway. The future land use map has designated the subject site as residential. There are 11 annexation policies. Highlighted are 4. The annexation should seek completion or continuation of a pedestrian network that connects neighborhoods to amenities, which is completed upon site development, which meaning that all the frontage improvements for sidewalks, street trees would be done and connect to the west side as well through site development. That it should be consistent with the city's master plans. From our staff report, from city staff, it seems to be consistent with the sewer, transportation, parks, and emergency services. And priority should be given to annexing lands that have utility infrastructure readily available. This would be considered consistent development, considering that the utilities are in place to the west through the first 2 Bel Cielo products, and should provide an orderly development and extension of public infrastructure easements and right-of-ways. Easements and right-of-ways would be required on 16th Avenue, and there would be a quarter-mile backage road that would also be required to provide easements and right-of-ways. The blue star on the bottom of the map shows the general proximity of the subject site. Within the gray lines is showing a 1-mile buffer between all parks that are already developed within the city. And then this is showing that the subject site is within that 1-mile buffer of parks. Some of the items for inclusion with this annexation would be that prior to development, the granting of all water rights to the city or designated purveyor be relinquished. Dedications of right-of-ways and easements along 16th Avenue and the quarter-mile backage road will be required with site development, and the payment of a sanitary sewer surcharge in the amount of $1,805.69, which is adjusted annually per service unit with the issuance of any building permits. The following were the agencies routed. Kootenai County Fire and Rescue and the Post Falls Police Department both remain neutral on the proposed project. I stand for any questions or comments.
Questions to Jamie at this point?
Oh, sure.
Oh, Al, you have one? Jamie, can you expand on the backage road a little bit?
Sure.
I mean, I understand that with the approval of this annexation, they'll have to put it in a backage road, but it doesn't go anywhere, right?
Well, I think that with continued development, that it is supposed to go somewhere, that these types of backage roads are basically instigated with site development and planned for in the transportation master plan. And so since this is, just to show you real quick right here, the Highway 41, and this is about a quarter mile, so it would be in this general, on the east end of the project location.
But if this is approved and that is developed and they put in a backage road, it really doesn't connect to anything else. So it doesn't really provide any additional traffic flow.
Rob, would you like to speak on this? I want to make sure you get a good, solid answer
Right.
to your question.
Honorable Mayor, members of the council, Robert Paulus, Assistant City Engineer. Councilman Wolfe, the quarter-mile backage road, at the time they developed that site, it is unlikely that it would connect to somewhere else. It does, within the Highway 41 corridor master plan, as well as the city's transportation master plan, show that that quarter-mile backage road will go down to 12th Avenue, which will be its terminus point on the south end. Northerly, it will continue and go to the city's northern boundaries eventually as development occurs on that side of Highway 41. We are seeing a similar development of a quarter-mile backage road west of Highway 41, and the first section between 12th and 16th was built a few years ago with the subdivision you see on the left edge of the screen.
Okay. I have another question for Jamie, but,
Go ahead, let's finish with you.
Okay, go ahead.
okay, Jamie? One of the conditions for annexation also is that that should be walkable to other services and amenities.
I'm glad you brought that up, yes. So upon site development, we know that all the frontage improvements are required. So frontage improvements are already in place along this whole entire quarter mile right here. With the development of Highway 41, the expansion of that, there's going to be a 12-foot pedestrian pathway on that, which it would connect to that pedestrian pathway, which could give people the opportunity to have access to the amenities on the Highway 41 corridor.
Okay,
Thank you.
Okay.
then good, that's
Steve.
fine.
Question, on the park overlay, it showed the closest park being a proposed future park. That was one, so I'm assuming the closest developed park would be Tullamore to this?
So actually, the closest park right here, and I'm sorry that this isn't maybe bigger or easier to see, is just right here. So that is actually, it's even hard for me to see. That is,
Dave, do you know what it is?
Real life news.
thank you, Horsehaven is what I was thinking.
Not developed, though.
Not developed. And then the green kind of like heat map circles that you see are maybe areas for proposed future parks as well.
But right now, the only park they could really walk to would be Tullamore, correct? And there's really no light. They'd have to go to probably Pole Line to cross to get to it.
Dave Fair, Parks and Recreation Director, Mayor and Council. That is correct that they would have to cross 41. 41 does create a barrier in there for walkability and access. In the future, to the north, Foxtail is supposed to put in a park, but I do not have a timeline as to when that will happen and with what phasing. But Tullamore is your closest access.
Now, you've talked about access east to west, west to east, 41. How far out, pedestrian, bicycle, et cetera, how far out is that, or is that still in the plan as 41 is developed?
On the east side will be the 12-foot trail, and then they'd have to go up to Prairie to cross. I believe there's
There'll be a light at 16th.
light at 16th or
Yes.
Hope.
Okay,
So,
good. Thank you. Steve, one more.
And this question might be more for John.
We'll get everybody.
We got a few staff members left, so.
I know, I'll get a few more. No, at our workshop, we discussed open space for multifamily developments. If we annex this now, would any of that pertain to this piece of property? Or would that, or what we're looking at, go into effect later once we adopt it? Potentially, if that code, when that code gets adopted, if the site plan and the permits come in post-adoption,
Okay.
then this 5 acres would be accountable to the code in place at the time.
Okay.
So
But-
vesting won't occur until we receive permits for that.
But there's
for
a chance it
applications.
could come in prior to us adopting the code too for open space.
Potentially.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you, John. Jamie, does proponent wish to speak? Name for the record, please.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Drew Dittman, Lake City Engineering, 126 East Poplar Avenue in the city of Coeur d'Alene. And yes, I do realize the date is incorrect. I apologize for that. Got ahead of myself. Bel Cielo 3 annexation is what we're here to discuss tonight. And as Jamie said, the property is located south of 16th Avenue. I've highlighted it here in red. Highway 41 runs north-south. This would be phase 1 of the Bel Cielo Apartments, which is constructed out, consists of 96 units, I believe. Phase 2 is currently under construction. Units probably available in the spring of next year. There's 87 units in that phase. And tonight we're here to talk about the annexation of what we're calling Bel Cielo Phase 3. We're requesting, obviously, the R3 zoning to match the adjoining properties. Here you can see the zoning map. So you've got R3, Bel Cielo Apartments Phase 2 to the west. You've got R3 to the north. The trailer parks are actually in Kootenai County, designated high-density residential, so those are a multifamily zone as well. Currently, the zoning in the county is agricultural. Your zoning ordinance establishes the following 6 criteria for approving zoning and establishing zoning. So and I know this has gone through in your staff report, and Jamie touched on it in her presentation, but I'll go through it here briefly. Number 3 and number 4 are really not applicable. Those would have to do with industrial zoning and commercial zoning, which we're not asking for. So I'll go through them. Number 1 I'll save for my next slide, but number 2 is high-density residential zoning. Is typically along streets with higher road classifications. 16th, as Jamie said, is designated as a major collector. It's going to be required to be a 42.5-foot wide right-of-way. Highway 41 is a principal arterial. And as was mentioned earlier, there will be a traffic signal at 16th and Highway 41. That's a part of the 41 widening, which is scheduled for 2020 and 2021. So you'll see a traffic signal there probably in the next 2 years. Number 5, amendments to the zoning map should be in accordance with the future land use map. The properties zone are designated, as residential on the future land use map, so it is in accordance with that. And then number 6 is amendments should be consistent with the policies in the comp plan. And Jamie had gone through that in her presentation, and there's a full analysis in the staff report and a comp plan analysis in the submittals that we made too. So I won't go through that. But let's look at number 1. Zoning is assigned following consideration of street classification, traffic patterns, existing development, future land uses, community plans, and geographic and natural features. So street classifications we've discussed. 16th is a major collector street. It's designed to handle high volumes of traffic. It's already improved all the way from the proposed site to Highway 41 on the south side. And with development of this piece, we'd have to do the improvements, the frontage improvements as well to widen out that road. There is a backage road that's required, as Councilor Wolfe brought up, that will run north-south. Now, it won't have an immediate effect on our development because it doesn't go anywhere, but it will help alleviate some of the traffic from the mobile home park. It'll provide them a secondary access out to the future traffic signal that's going to be there. Existing development, obviously we've got adjacent apartments to the west of us. You've got R3 zone property to the north, and you've got the mobile home park to the south and to the east. So it does fit in with the existing character and the existing developments that are around there. And as well as the future land uses, because you do have high-density residential property surrounding it. As far as community and infrastructure plans, it is in conformance with your wastewater master plan. The multifamily zoning was considered in that. Currently, the property does not have sewer extended to it. It'll be the developer's obligation to find a sewer routing that works, that's in accordance with the master plan. We are aware of that. It is to the south of the property. Water is Ross Point Water District, and they have water available and the willingness to serve the property. And then geographic and natural features, there really aren't any. It's a pretty flat piece of site, so there's no issues there that would hinder development. On page 14, or excuse me, page 11 of the staff report, and Jamie went through it, there were some conditions for the annexation. We've read through those and we're agreeable to those conditions. So I'll answer questions if you have any.
Any questions, Mr. Dittman? Oh.
I don't have any questions about zoning, but I do have questions about annexation.
Sure.
Do you have any of those slides there that we could look at, or?
As far as?
The connectivity, the fact that infrastructure needs to be in place before a piece of property is annexed into the city?
So here, this black line here is current city limits, comes down right here and over and around the trailer park. So infrastructure is in 16th, currently to the edge of the property. As I said, sewer is down here, and the master plan shows sewer running north, and what would be the developer's obligation to go get that sewer and to make it work.
Those two are covered. I'm concerned more about the walkability and the parks.
Mm-hmm.
One of the issues that came up in the planning and zoning hearing was that it was all about the timing.
Correct.
That everything was kind of predicated on the fact that, that leaned, I guess, toward the fact that Highway 41 is going to be,
Sure.
we plan on it being developed, and that there will be a light at 16th and there'll be a walking trail. But I guess my concern is that if we approve this as an annexation now, we can't stall development if those other actions don't take place.
Understand. So maybe this might put it a little bit in perspective. We annexed, if you remember, Bel Cielo Phase 3 a little over a year ago. And they are currently under construction, and as I said, they're not going to have units available until May. So
Phase 2.
Phase 2, correct. Sorry, yeah, Phase 2. This phase right here.
Yep.
We annexed that over a year ago, and they'll have units available in the spring. So from the time of annexation to the time when they actually have units the first set of units that could come on the market, it's a 1.5-year time frame. That's how long it takes to get through the entitlement processes, through the development processes, through construction and whatnot. So even though you're annexing it today, impacts are a 1.5 to 2 years down the road, which seems to fit with what's going on with the Highway 41 widening, which is supposed to start next year.
Key word there, supposed to start.
Sure. ITD is telling us that it's going to start.
Yeah, I know. I guess my biggest concern with this project is just the fact that the timing about it. So correct me if I'm wrong, Warren, there's nothing we can do after annexation as far as saying development can't take place until the work is done on Highway 41.
So typically, once you're in the city, you have the right to use your property for whatever rights are allowed under the zoning code.
Okay. I think you've answered my questions. Thank you.
Any questions?
Thank you for your time. Yep.
And we had two forms submitted for speaking. One was Mr. Dittman, and he just did, in favor, obviously. And we have one in opposition, Ann Hayes. And you do wish to speak? Please come forward, name for the record, please.
Good evening, and thank you, Mayor and City Council, for listening to me. Yes, I am opposition. Just to give you some if you don't mind my using the slide. My property is actually just off the slide. Our property, where my family is, right over here. From our property, we can see the developments here. I live in Post Falls, although on county property. My primary concern is, I think, allied with Councilman Wolfe. Right now, as he said, 96 units in 1, 87 units in Phase 2. That's over 180 new units, houses, each with a car. They are all dumping, they're all having to use 16th Avenue right now The 97 units are occupied as far as 96. There's no light there. And as of years ago, we already knew 41 was overtaxed. In the last year, we just put another 180 cars just at that one street, just that one intersection. It is not a safe intersection. I am able to access the Mullen Avenue but I'm on a dirt road. And for anybody who wants to access a traffic light, they either go through our dirt road, which is probably about 18 feet wide, and has potholes, and it's maintained by the residents, or they have to go around 16th. Now, they pointed out that 16th is going to be designated high traffic. It is not high traffic now. It is a rural county road. It has no sidewalk. It has no shoulder. In fact, 3 nights ago, a car ran off, hit a telephone pole, knocked it down. We had a big explosion in the middle of the night. Power went out everywhere. It can't handle traffic going around to Pull Line right now. It simply can't. And if someday 16th Avenue does handle that, well, all well and good, but it can't do it now. And I guess my feeling is this: I'm not against development in general. I understand where we're going with this, but I just really feel strongly, not here and not now. We haven't even felt the impact yet of Bel Cielo 2, which is dumping another 87 cars, if they're all occupied, onto 16th Avenue. And we will not have a light there for several years. I mean, even assuming all of 41 gets approved and goes through, that's 180 cars right there at that one intersection with no light. If you've ever driven 41 at high traffic times, you know how difficult it is. I mean, maybe they'll all turn north and it'll be a little easier, but even then, the traffic, especially because if you recall from Highway 95, or 90 rather, we have 2 lanes up until about 12th Avenue, then it goes to 1 lane. And so at 16th, you've got 1 lane in either direction. You do have a turn lane left and right, but that's it. I just feel we don't even know yet the impact of what Bel Cielo 2 is doing. I just am very worried about approving this now, grandfathering it in. As he said, you get your rights. Once you annex it, once you zone it a certain way, they have certain rights to use the property a certain way. Right now, you have rural. I mean, the annexation is 5-acre rural right now, part of the county. You have complete county to the south of it. It's starting this long leg on 16th Avenue. I don't know that there's any, that a trailer park, yes, it's high density, but it's 20 houses for 5 acres. It is not 80 houses for 5 acres. It's still low density. So I just feel very strongly, not right now, until we know the impact. Until 41's improved, we won't know that impact, and I just think it's just not prudent at this time. Thank you for your time.
Perfect. Rebuttal. And I'd like to say, anybody who does wish to testify tonight, there is a timer up here, and you did perfect. You ended it right on the 0, by the way. But if you are testifying, please keep your eye on the timer.
Again, Drew Dittman, Lake City Engineering, for the record. It is a timing thing, and perhaps Mr. Melvin or Mr. Paulus could give us some more information on the 41. They probably know more about it than I do on the timing of it. We obviously felt it was appropriate to come in. As I said, it takes 1.5 years to 2 years to get to completion and to get to deliverable units. And so from our standpoint, that timing seemed to coincide exactly with what ITD is proposing and what ITD is telling us. And so that's why we felt it appropriate to bring it forward at this time. So, any further questions for me? Thank you.
Excuse me, did you? Mr. Wilson?
So you can allow him to speak. You would need to allow Mr. Dittman a chance to rebut any comments that he makes.
Okay. Is that all right with council?
That's good with me.
Please, would you give your form to Deborah, and then we'll let you talk. Come forward, please. Brandon Scarcello is in opposition.
Yes, sorry about that, by the way. I live just down 16th.
on Maverick Lane, same as the other people. And I think you're not going to slow down progress. It's going to keep creeping out to the county and keep expanding the city. But 16th Avenue, as she stated, is a county road. And with the phase 1 on there on top of Goodwill, 16th became a hazard. Now phase 2 is going in, and the traffic on 16th, there is no shoulders. It's a county road. There is no sidewalk. Yeah, there will be, in front of the apartments, but you get to Highway 41 and we can see what 95 in Coeur d'Alene is. And I don't feel that Highway 41, we should already set up to be that before it's even developed. Highway 41, everything south of pole line turns into a traffic jam and traffic accidents waiting to happen daily. And safety should be the #1 concern for everybody. And Highway 41 is probably the most accident-caused road in the city. You got commercial traffic just to the north. You got a garbage truck place that comes out on Horse Haven. You got Ziggy's, you got other commercial ends. And adding more traffic in an area without a stoplight already existing is a recipe for disaster. With the fire department directly across Highway 41, I've been there when fire trucks are trying to come out on Highway 41 and turning north, and their access is extremely limited because of visibility. I've been right up to the point where a fire truck pulls out in front of me, and I have to nail my brakes. And they should have the right of way. They should have the visibility, and people on the road should be able to see that. And, you get more traffic coming out on 16th. What's going to happen when the fire truck gets in an accident there because the highway cannot handle the traffic. So a high density, I don't feel is the right thing. Like the trailer parks, there's 20 some for 5 acres. Put 90 units or whatever it is in 5 acres, and if they have 1 car, that's 90 cars. But 16th is turned into a parking lot because of phase 1 and 2. Last winter, there was a pickup and 2 cars that didn't even move from the road all winter long. Turning out of the apartments is an accident waiting to happen also because of all the cars parked on the street. It's just not designed for it yet, and I hope that's considered with all of that don't jump the gun and put everybody at risk. And that's all I got to say.
Thank you, Mr. Scalo.
Thank you.
Mr. Dibben, you want to come up again?
Again, Drew Dittman, Lake City Engineering for the record. Just clarification more than anything. So 16th Avenue is improved all the way up to this point. It's a city road all the way up to the end of Bel Cielo 3. It's curb gutter, sidewalks on the south side, swales. With development of this phase, again, we would be extending and fully developing 16th Avenue per your transportation master plans to the edge of our property. As far as parking and whatnot on 16th, I know that was brought up actually at the planning meeting, and I think it was a code enforcement issue, if I'm not mistaken. And if I remember, Rob was he's shaking his head, was gonna look into that because it was brought up at the planning meeting as well. And I don't know if he's got an update on that. Perhaps he could enlighten us. So.
Thank you. Rob, did you have an update on that, or you?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council know, it's just that if there is a parking issue out there, it would be a code enforcement, and we haven't had staff out there seeing that there's a significant problem with traffic being parked too close to Highway 41 at this time. The road construction for 16th Avenue is one that will allow for at least a lane of parking when it is fully developed.
Thanks, Rob. Do you have a question, Linda? Do you want me to close?
I was just going to have Rob speak to can I do that? Can I ask him a question?
Should I do it, or should I close the public hearing?
I think now is appropriate time.
Okay, thanks, Linda.
I'm just wondering, Rob, if you could speak to the timing maybe of the light, since you've updated us on that before.
So for the Highway 41 construction project, The city has provided final design review comments to Idaho Transportation Department about 2 weeks ago. That puts ITD in the position where they are trying to get what they call PS&E plan specs and engineering approval so that they can then get their dollars allocated for construction. They are working on trying to complete right-of-way acquisition, and what we're being told is they're still looking at spring of 2020 for the start of construction. It's a 2-year construction window for the project. We have inquired about when do they anticipate the traffic signals going in. That is something that's in flux. We know that by the end of the project, they'll be up and operating, but when the contractor would stage for certain elements to go in, we do not know, and ITD does not have complete control of that element. You can anticipate that while Highway 41 is under construction, regardless of whether there's going to be a traffic signal there or not in place, you're going to see the same things at Pole Line Avenue and Prairie Avenue where there are existing signals. While they are moving traffic and building the road, that is a dangerous time for a roadway because road lanes change, sometimes on a daily basis. You have a lot of heavy traffic, construction activity, which distracts drivers. And so that's a tough time for people to build roads as well as for people to move through an area. And so you do see greater congestion, slower traffic during construction. That's the best I can give you.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Joe.
So pursuant to that, so the Highway 41 project you're discussing is only down to Mullen Avenue, correct?
That is correct. The section between Mullen Avenue and I-90 is scheduled for construction to start either 2022 or 2023.
So assuming that the residents of these new buildings who want to use the freeway every once in a while, that intersection is not going to be mitigated for at least about another 4 years, correct?
That would be fair to say, yes.
Okay.
So Rob, if we look toward the future, say 6 months from now, you said spring of 2020 was when we were supposed to break ground. Everything goes along, we get to spring of 2020, we break ground. Would they know then when that light will go in at 16th?
When they award a contract, the contractor will need to provide a schedule to the Idaho Transportation Department, and on that schedule, they will show major milestones such as when the traffic signals will go in. With any construction project, you try to follow that, and I have to say, you take it with a little bit of grain of salt, because sometimes there are things that happen during construction that require you to change things around. But most projects do tend to follow the major milestones according to the plan that they submit.
So if we waited 6 months, we'd have a better idea when that light's actually going to go in. I know it's not going to be exact.
The future's always in flux, but yes, we would.
Okay.
We would know if right-of-way is acquired within 6 months, and that is a key element before any construction can move forward, and right now, right-of-way is not fully acquired.
Can I ask the legal department something? Warren, is it not true that if an annexation is turned down, they cannot reapply for an annexation for 1 year?
Typically, that's what our ordinance requires. If an application has been denied, it's typically a year wait.
Thank you.
I'm going to make an exception to that.
Maybe. So I'd have to look at that exactly as what our code says. Our code really doesn't speak to annexations. It follows the state code. Our code speaks to zoning, to the zoning element of this application. So that's a solid maybe. The other thing to keep in mind is you could potentially put some parameters on development timeframes in an annexation agreement that could speak to some of this. That would be another potential approach for you to consider.
Okay.
I'm going to close the public hearing. And now, is there further discussion?
Yeah, I'll follow up with that.
Perfect.
Okay, I guess you guys have probably guessed by now, I'm a little bit hesitant on this just because of the timing. And I was just thinking that if we could wait like 6 months and get a better plan, because, if I read this, item 4 of our annexation policy says clearly, timing of annexation should be coordinated with opportunities for orderly development of public systems. Well, what I'm looking at is just the transportation alone. if we don't know. It's still kind of out there that this is supposed to happen. It could, and then even item 3 is it's supposed to have continuation of pedestrian network, which we won't have until we get to Highway 41. So I'm concerned that we're just a little bit ahead of the game. If we approve this for Mr. Dittman and his proponent tonight, then he can just develop it when he's ready. And if that's 2 years, then that's great. And now we've got another 80 units there that's dumping more and more out onto Highway 41 before we're really ready for it to be there. That's my biggest concern. That's why I was kind of leading that, could we just put this off 6 months? 6 months from now, we know if Highway 41 is going to actually happen and when it's going to happen and when that light's going to be there. I'd feel much better about expanding the size of the city at that point.
So Warren, go back to your comment you made a minute ago. If annexation were to be approved, how would you address this 6 months that Al's talking about through a development agreement?
So you could do a couple of different things. One would be you could deny it tonight. And like, as I said, there's nothing in state code that talks about when a delay on how long it takes if you've had a denial. We do have code that deals with other development issues. My inclination, and I say this without having had a chance to sit down and look at the code, would be that they'd be able to apply again because it's an annexation within 6 months. Another possible option would be to move forward with the annexation tonight. We'd need to negotiate an annexation agreement with the applicant. That's going to take some time anyways. That always takes a few months before you see those back. And try to negotiate essentially a timeline in that agreement that essentially would try to back into that date, that there would be essentially no occupancies prior to the signal going in. Whether or not that's doable, I've not met with the applicant. I don't know if that's something they'd be amenable to or not, but that would be another potential approach.
Thank you. Steve?
Yeah, Warren, it seems like if we approve tonight and we do that, there's a lot of ifs there. If the developer agrees, if we come up with a plan, if the council agrees, that, to me, there's just too much unknown in that if we approve it tonight.
So my response would be, we don't sign off on the annexation agreement, you do. Right. So at the end of the day, if we bring back to you an annexation agreement that you're not satisfied with, you're free to turn that down. And at that point, the annexation is over. So you still retain that control. I'm not saying that that's the way to go. I'm just saying that's a potential option for you.
If we turned it down twice, though, then it would be hard to justify bringing it back another 6 months again.
You could...
we could turn it down as many times as we want, correct?
Potentially, yes. And there are, as I think Councilman Wolfe has noted, there's going to be some changed circumstances in the relatively near future in that corridor. So every time you hear it, the background situation could potentially be different.
Okay. Kerri, any comments?
If it were denied, they can come back in 6 months or longer? You're thinking so?
My leaning is that they could come back. I haven't looked at the code on zoning. I haven't had time tonight, but that's my leaning. If not, they'd be required to wait a year.
But we could also put in the annexation agreement timing.
We could attempt to do that. We could attempt to negotiate for that.
Yeah, that's the dilemma. Thank you.
Joe?
I feel the same about this one as I did about Bill Cielo 2 and the other high-density annexations that have come up along the Highway 41 corridor, is that we're not even built out on what we've approved. There's been a very painfully noticeable increase in traffic along the Highway 41 corridor, all the way down to Celtice Way I-90 in the last 3 years. What did the slide say earlier? We're up 100% population in the last 10 or 12 years. And we're getting way too far ahead of ourselves. I think one of our biggest duties as representatives of the citizens is to make sure that the expansion doesn't overtax the ability to handle it. 41 from Mullen to Prairie is still 2 years off. Me and 3,000 of my best friends get to deal with Dysfunction Junction every morning at 7 o'clock trying to get onto the freeway, and that's not going to be dealt with until 2023. We don't know what the impact of the construction that's underway already is going to be. I already know as bad as it is. So, yeah, I think in the future, again, over and over again in this presentation, in the future there will be a light, in the future there will be a park, in the future there will be this. So let's wait till the future to do this. We don't have to take responsibility for county property, and in this case, I think it's the wrong time to do so.
Lynn?
I have a huge concern for the traffic flow. 16th is the major roadway that all of these apartments are going to dump out onto Highway 41. There is no other paved road to the east until you get clear over to Meyer Road before you can go north or south on a decent paved road. We're putting a lot there. I think, for me, timing is everything. Until we can get 41 improvements done and light there, I have a huge concern for the traffic.
Linda?
I agree with Lynn Borders.
You know, my thought is it's probably well known, I'm not a jump up and down huge fan of as much multifamily as we've seen. That's probably a good area for it. I think the annexation makes sense. But again, I'm going to agree on the timing issues. I think that it's a challenge. Go back to what Mr. Malloy says. I drive that a couple times a week because I avoid it the rest of the time, that intersection. And I think it's logical. I think it's will happen. But, you know, my thought is timing has to be addressed, whether that's via denial tonight, and bringing it back, or approval tonight with a specificity as to what would be required in an annexation agreement. You know, I think that would be the important thing, and the details would have to be the timing. So with that, I would entertain a motion.
I would move to deny the Bell CLO 3 LLC annexation.
Second.
Motion seconds. Further discussion. Roll call, please.
Wilhelm?
Aye.
Borders?
Aye.
Anthony?
Aye.
Malloy?
Aye.
Wolfe?
Aye.
And Thoreson.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next item up is the next public hearing, Ruby Springs annexation. And I will open the public hearing.
Good evening, Mayor Jacobson, Council President Wilhelm, and council members. I'm Ethan Porter, planner one with the City of Post Falls, here to present the Ruby Springs annexation, case file ANNX-8-2019. The owners of this proposal is Waldhorse Investments, LLC, and the applicant is Whipple Consulting Engineers. The City Council tonight is being asked to review the annexation request of approximately 5.73 acres and to make a decision of approval or denial of the proposed single-family residential R1 zoning designation. Here you can see in the red hatch the project site, or the subject site, excuse me. South of Prairie Avenue, which is a principal arterial. You have North Chase Road to the west, which is a minor arterial, and then North Spokane Street to the east, which is a major collector. Here you can see the Crown Point development to the north, and then these are where the apartments will be for the Crown Point subdivision as well. Looking at the subject site, you can see the current land use is large lot residential home within the Kootenai County currently. There's no significant topography or vegetation characteristics or issues that have been identified on this property. The water provider would be East Green Acres Irrigation District, and the sewer would be provided by City of Post Falls. Now looking at the zoning, like I said and mentioned earlier, you have the smart code to the north, which is SC3 and then SC4 to the northeast. To the east, you have the residential subdivision, and then south you have the Pheasants Landings subdivision that's currently being developed, which is also R1. And then to the northwest, you have county lands all in this white area. And then R1S subdivision to the southwest. Planning and Zoning Commission, they provided a recommendation of R1 zoning based on the zone change criteria that is found in your staff report. Looking at the future land use designation, we can see that south of Prairie is designated as all residential, which includes the subject site. And then of the 11 annexation policies that were reviewed in the staff report, some of them are just the mentioned here is the pedestrian network and the connectivity between neighborhoods, and you can see that within development there will be frontage improvements, so furthering the sidewalk connection, and I believe this is just one more parcel closer to completing the full south of Prairie sidewalk to North Chase Road to Spokane Street. So it's getting closer with this proposal. And then the city master plans, the water reclamation master plan, as well as the transportation master plan, show this as a planned area for growth, and so the transportation didn't show any issues with that as far as being an R1 zoning. And then looking at the annexation lands that have utility infrastructure readily available, you can see that it was adjacent to R1 subdivisions, which is connected to city infrastructure, which would be readily available for this R1 zoning designation. And so looking at the fourth item here, as far as open space and parks, we can see here on the additional park and open space target areas that in the star here you can see there's a subject site, and you have the Crown Point Park as well to the northeast, and it is within the mile buffer for the parks and open space. Looking at the annexation agreement inclusions that are provided there, there's three of them. The first one is basically the commencement development of property. The owner shall grant to the city or municipal water purveyor designated by the city all water rights associated with the land being annexed, but may continue to use the water for agricultural purposes from the well located on site, if any, until such time that the annexed area is fully developed, at which time owner shall discontinue the use of the well serving the property and use of the water for agricultural purposes. And then secondly is just the dedication of right-of-way and easements along Prairie Avenue, being a 55-foot principal arterial right-of-way, and then you have a 15-foot sidewalk that would be included with the drainage and utility easement. And then number three is the KMPO critical access corridor policy being subject to their corridor policy. And then here were the agencies that were routed. And then the Post Falls Police Department had remained neutral on the proposal.
Any questions of Ethan?
Oh. Yes.
Ethan, if this is approved, would traffic from this subdivision have access to Prairie Avenue?
Depending on the, I believe it was the subject, the site access subject to KMPO critical access corridor policy. We currently don't allow, as far as the city standard, and maybe Rob can back me up on this as well, but for if it's an R1 subdivision, we wouldn't allow single-family homes to be accessed onto a principal arterial. They would most likely be accessed internally with streets, and then they would eventually go south and then branch out. I believe that's North Mashie, and then they would connect with Ashworth to go either North Chase Road or Spokane Street.
Yeah, I noticed in the P&Z report that I think it was Mr. Kimball said that the idea would be that they would go south on Mashie and then
correct
east or west on Ashworth, but I didn't know whether we restricted access to Prairie or...
Yeah, I'll let Rob touch on that.
Okay, thank you.
Honorable Mayor, members of the council, Robert Paulus, Assistant City Engineer. We do prohibit direct access of residential lots onto principal arterials and even minor arterial roadways, such as Prairie Avenue. The design of the subdivision is such that it would have no direct access onto Prairie Avenue. If you go back to what the KMPO critical arterials corridor policy says, we could allow a subdivision to have access onto Prairie, but at some point, whether initial development or later, it would have to be restricted to right in, right out only, because we are trying to preserve capacity on Prairie Avenue and restrict full access movements and signalized or roundabout control at half-mile spacing. Spokane Street and Chase are the closest locations for that full access. So the internal access down to Ashworth and then to Horse Haven over to Chase. Actually, Ashworth goes all the ways out to Chase, and then Ashworth also goes all the ways out to Spokane Street, is the best access point for that subdivision.
Second part of the question, would they have pedestrian access to Prairie? Because I know we're going to put a sidewalk all the way, well, it'll be completed then. But so they should be able to get out of the subdivision and at least get on
Through that road network, yes. The adjoining subdivision does have one location where there is actually, no, it isn't. There is a pedestrian access over here that goes up. We did not put in the findings or the conclusions, any type of provisions to put in a pedestrian access anywhere in this area.
Okay.
Would it make sense? I would
No,
tend to agree with you.
it makes sense. I just wondered if we could require that.
Yes.
Okay.
So there's a paved walking trail on the north side of the existing subdivision over here. Is that going to be extended across that?
So there's an existing walking trail on the north side that runs from here all the ways to Spokane Street.
Correct.
On the south side, there's a paved 10-foot asphalt trail that runs from here to this point here.
Correct.
This subdivision here cashed out their asphalt trail section. The city is trying to move forward. We're anticipating 2021 for construction to modify this intersection, and that would allow us to extend the walkway all the ways to Spokane Street.
Okay, so what about across the frontage of this property?
This property, we would probably propose that they cash out their frontage improvements. Our goal is that when we redo this intersection here, that we will completely rebuild Prairie Avenue from Spokane Street to this point here and put in all of the urban improvements that are required per our master plan.
Thank you. Thanks,
You're
Rob.
welcome.
Any other questions of Ethan? Thank you, Ethan. Anybody wishing to, the proponent, I'm sorry. Mr. Kimball.
Thought you forgot about me.
Never.
Let's see here. All right. My name is Ray Kimball. My address is 2104 Columbine Court here in Post Falls. I'm a civil engineer for Whipple Consulting Engineers. I'm here tonight representing Wild Horse Investments, LLC, regarding this annexation. Ethan did a great job. I'll direct you to the staff report, the minutes from the previous public hearing, and our application for the vast majority of the record. You don't need us to go through that too much more. So here's the site. You've seen this. It's fairly straightforward. So this subdivision here to the south, Pheasant's Landing, is built. There's building houses in there right now. So there's connectivity, sidewalk connectivity. So our main access point to the subdivision that we have on deck is right here at Massey Street, and it'll provide pedestrian connectivity straight south into the sidewalk network, which has great pedestrian connectivity both east-west out to Spokane Street. Like Rob mentioned, pole line right now, the improvements aren't done right now. There is a pathway. It's kind of a pathway to nowhere. It's weeds on both sides, not super attractive. And we would agree that it's probably most important that we cash these things out, and that way the project can get done, and it's not a hodgepodge of, little chunks of asphalt here that's really old, and then new stuff, and old curb, new curb, and those kinds of things. With regards to project site city limits, this is the future land use map. You can see project site surrounded by residential designation. So we have an R1, proposed R1 annexation. It meets with the comp plan map. With regards to the criteria for annexation, it does meet the being compatible with street classification, traffic patterns, existing development, etc. The lower density residential is assigned for properties further away from urban activity, and we're approximately 2 miles away from the high intensity Southeast Way corridor. And we are in conformance with the future land use map. And we provided a pretty extensive comp plan analysis with regards to goals and policies in our application. And we meet many of those goals and policies. And excuse me, I'm coming down with a little bit of a cold here. And so really I'll just stand for any questions or concerns. I don't think it's too out of the ordinary here. This is pretty straightforward.
Any questions, Mr. Kimball? Thanks, Ray.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone wishing to testify?
I have none, sir.
I do not want to rebut nobody.
I will close the public hearing. Council.
I think it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, this one makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, I have less heartburn about this one because there's multiple ways to get in and out, north, south, east, west. We're talking 25 units as opposed to 90.
It's getting nice seeing R1, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's not on the Highway 41 corridor, which is nice. I mean, Spokane Street's getting pretty bad too, but an extra 25 units isn't going to kill that, especially when they can go west on Prairie pole line. They have other options there too, so.
Yeah. I like the fact it is single family, that with the cash out, that'll give the city the opportunity to have one consistent bike trail and swell along there too, and make the improvements along Prairie.
I would move to approve the Ruby Springs annexation ANNX-0008-2019.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion? Deborah, please take the roll.
Anthony.
Aye.
Borders.
Aye.
Wilhelm.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Wolfe.
Aye.
And Thoreson.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Third public hearing tonight is a Savory Annexation and Comprehensive Plan Amendment. I'll open the public hearing.
Good evening, Mayor Jacobson, Council President Wilhelm, and members of City Council. So yes, the Savory Annexation and Comprehensive Plan Amendment is being proposed by the applicant. The Comprehensive Plan Amendment, the file number for that is the CPA 2019 with the ANNX 6 2019 representing the annexation request. The owner is the Savory Family Trust with Whipple Consulting Engineers here to represent that ownership group. What the applicant's requesting for City Council for you to review and approve an amendment to the comprehensive plan of about 4 acres from what's designated as commercial to residential, and to approve approximately 8.61 acres to the high-density multifamily R3 zoning designation. First, I'm going to go through the comprehensive plan amendment portion of it and then the zoning part of it. There's 2 decisions to be had at this ultimately, one dealing with the 4 acres for the comp plan and then the annexation part. So the comprehensive plan amendment location is what you see here in the red hatched. I'll have some better slides coming up kind of showing the location, but it's southeast of the Highway 41 interchange. You have Ross Point Road at this point, and you have Maplewood Avenue right here that runs to the south. So, and then you have the rail corridor at south of there. So you can see here the red, that's that commercial designation. And so they're desiring to kind of switch from a red to a yellow for residential. I gotta get snipping of this from Google Earth to kind of get an understanding of kind of how this kind of lays out. Here's the current Highway 41 interchange, Southeast Way corridor. You have 3rd Avenue that's just south of there. It runs east-west. Admittedly, for a commercial designation, this isn't an ideal location for commercial. You don't have the traffic counts and the volumes of traffic that would typically warrant that commercial designation that you would see like in the comp plan requiring your higher traffic volumes. You do have some single-family homes in the county. This is south off in this direction. To the west off this way, you've got some single-family homes west of Ross Point Road. And then 3rd Avenue, you've got some multifamily here, and then you have some duplexes. The current land use on this is on the north part of it vacant with residential on the southern half. There's no significant topology or vegetation on this site. And the city of Post Falls would be the sewer provider and water provider for this site. Looking at this location in regards to residential as a designation, it is close to some CityLink bus routes, so that plays maybe some more merit in the zoning analysis, but in looking at whether it should be commercial or residential could play a role in providing additional housing near transit. Looking at some comp plan policies, once again looking at commercial and residential and delineating for those designations. For this one, probably the most is the second one, is providing opportunities for independence for those who do not drive. That's that nexus to the Route B, that transit, with people living there, no matter what kind of housing, whether it's single family or multifamily, would provide that. And then also providing a range of housing types in different areas. So residential would provide that as well. So pretty much that's, from my perspective, from a staff to report a kind of the facts of the comp plan. Do you have any questions for me about the comp plan part at this point?
I see none.
So looking at the zone change aspect of the annexation and the annexation request, so here's that 8.61 acres. You can see it kind of extended a little further to the south towards Maplewood Avenue. And at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting last month, they reviewed the proposal against the zone change review criteria and did recommend approval for the high-density multifamily zoning district for these against these 6 criteria. One, consistent with the future land use map. I guess that's presumptuous a little bit. I mean, the verdict's out whether or not it gets approved tonight or not, but subject to if it did, then this proposal for the R3 would be consistent. Goals and policies found in the comprehensive plan. So for the multifamily, it says it should have access to arterial and collector streets, serve as a buffer between commercial and industrial users and lower density single family zones, and as part of projects involved in a mixed use master plan, neighborhoods, or within the portions of the community subject to commercial conventional zones. So going back to this kind of aerial imagery, you can see the request and how it kind of meets that condition, because you have along Celtice Way this commercial industrial, vacant commercial industrial that'll be developed down the road. You have this industrial steel building type structures just north of 3rd Avenue, and then you have this transitional type housing that's kind of started to occur where you see the duplex that's currently being developed. You have some duplexes at this location, and on 3rd Avenue you have some multifamily. So you kind of see that from Maplewood, Ross Point, and north of 3rd, that buffering of that built environment starting to occur. And looking at some of the surrounding zones, and you can see the zoning mirroring some of that aerial imagery with the R3, the commercial, the R2, duplex zoning at this location. You see the R1 yellow to the south. Here's that county pocket of residential land use. And then you see to the north and east of this proposal that industrial commercial zones. Here's that future land use map where the request at 4 acres to go to residential. The other one is looking at the street classifications, existing development, future land uses, community plans, geographic features, encouraging a balance of land uses for Post Falls. In the staff report, you can see how that the proposal wouldn't be inconsistent with the transportation master plan for those areas. The existing development is compatible with multifamily. There is no really community plan for this area outside of just zoning and the comp plan goals and policies. There are no known geographic features or natural features that would impede the development of this nature. So more or less this criteria I believe was viewed as being met at the P&Z. Commercial and high density residential zoning is typically assigned on streets with higher road classifications. Maplewood Avenue is a major collector, so the proposed multifamily would be compatible with that criteria. And then the lower density zoning is typically assigned for properties as they proceed farther away from higher intense urban activity. The Highway 41 node in Celtice is a pretty urban node, and it's not necessarily a rural area, so the proposal is consistent with that. And then with the industrial zoning, that wouldn't be very applicable. Looking at the annexation policies, one that's not on here that probably should be mentioned is there's a priority should be given to infill areas regarding annexations, and this is an infill pocket. The pedestrian network that connects neighborhoods to amenities, like with all development, at times they would put the adjoining infrastructure along the right-of-way for pedestrians to get to and fro. Utility and infrastructure readily available. This project could be serviced with sewer and water. And orderly development being infill, one could argue that and you have utilities and services would be considered orderly, and also it's consistent with the city master plans. Here is the proposed location. You do have Kiwanis Park that's fairly close. You also you can get access to the Centennial Trail that would get you out to Beck Park fairly easily. For items to be included in an annexation agreement, that prior to development, any water rights would need to be given to the city or appropriate purveyor, and that the dedication of easement and right-of-way along 3rd Avenue, Pinion Park Road, or Maplewood Avenue would need to be given. I would like to note that in the staff report, for whatever reason, that Maplewood Avenue didn't make it, so this is an addition to what was in the staff report. Here are the agencies that were routed. We heard from both Kootenai County Fire and Police as neutral on the proposal. So I'd stand for questions.
John, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
We continue to see agencies routed, and we see the same two responding. Do we ever hear from the school district?
No, we don't. We know they get noticed and I know recently that there was that emergency bond too, so I don't know.
Well, the reason I ask the question is, I know our neighbors to the east have had some discussion between the city and the school district, and the relationship between our city and our school district has been very good. But if we look at this as if it were to be approved with a number of units that could go in there, the previous 2 annexations ago that was denied with the number of units that could go in, it could have will have a huge impact on the schools. I wonder if it's kind of deviates maybe a little bit from this particular hearing, but is there anything we can do to encourage more input from the school districts on, especially if it's multifamily?
We've emailed them. We've asked for some comment, and the response I've gotten in the past is, well, no comment. If we had an issue, we'd comment.
Okay.
And not saying that that's the best path, but I see Warren wants to chime in, so I'll let him.
I'm just going to say another thing to keep in mind is every time we do update the comprehensive plan, we are required to take a look at the impact on the schools and how that planning effort is going to feed into that. So we do solicit their input specifically to try to build that into our master planning documents so that as we're moving forward, that's one of the things we look at when we're saying consistent with the comprehensive plan, we know what their expectations are. They can also look at our comprehensive plan and their growth projections and trying to plan for their future growth and say, okay, we know that in this area, we're going to see X amount of growth of this quantity, so they can start planning and budgeting and preparing for that growth. But we do reach out. You'll see that in our upcoming draft, a section on education.
I appreciate that, because we hear oftentimes people say you haven't taken into consideration the impact on the schools, and actually we do. And we actually reach out to the school district asking for their input as well. So I just want to make sure that that was still ongoing. Steve, you had a question?
I know, John. I know we're just talked about zoning and annexation tonight, but is there any thought, would the access to this development be off Pinion and 3rd Street and then go down onto Maplewood?
I can let
3rd Street to Ross Point, or Maplewood to either go to Cedar and Ross Point?
Well, from my understanding, the plan is to utilize 3rd Avenue for an access route out, as well as Maplewood Avenue, so that you'd have to have those 2 connections for that many units. When the applicant comes up, maybe
Yeah,
talk more clearly what their intent is for the
Yeah.
development part of it.
it seems like if you got access off of Pinion, you could either go to 3rd Street, Ross Point, or if you came down Pinion, go Maplewood and go either direction too.
Lynn, you have a question?
Is 3rd Street going east from Ross Point, though? Is that an improved road right now?
I don't think so.
You know,
Right
I
there?
actually don't know the status of Third. I actually would punt to Rob. He
Wallace?
probably could.
It's pretty rough.
It's kind of rough, yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't think that's much of a
Honorable
road.
Mayor and Council, Third Avenue is constructed, though it does not have full urban improvements. There is a paved roadway that is in excess of 20 feet of width in that section.
Thanks, Rob. Al?
Rob, when you say it's improved, is there a sidewalk along Third?
No,
No.
there's not.
All there is there's an asphalt road there. It's missing curb, gutter, sidewalk.
Okay.
It's not in the greatest of shape.
I don't think I've ever been down it. I have a question for John along that same line. Staying consistent with pedestrian access in and out. So, as Rob just said, there's no sidewalk, what is that, west of the proposed property, right? No sidewalk there.
Yeah, nope, we just, heard that.
How about south? Is there any sidewalk along
You would end up,
Maplewood?
so here you would get improvements here, but yes, there would be a gap from here to here until such time that was dealt with, either through development in the future or by other means.
So there's no sidewalks to go anywhere.
Any other questions? Thanks, John. Opponent?
Figure it out.
Two for two. All right, Ray Kimball, Whipple Consulting Engineers. My address is 2104 Columbine Court, for the record. So I'm here tonight representing the Savory family. Interestingly enough, I met Mr. Savory about a year ago. Really nice old gentleman. I asked him how long he'd owned the property. He just kind of looked up. Late 60s? And so when I was doing some of the research, the boundary research and whatnot on it, I came across the Pine Villa plat. So when Pine Villa was first turned into a subdivision, and sure enough, right there, just north of Pine Villa on that property, Savory, landowner name right there on that property. So it's pretty interesting. The Savory family has owned the property since the late 60s. It is there on 3rd Avenue, sandwiched between 3rd and Maplewood, as John mentioned. Interestingly enough, 3rd is also designated as a collector in the city's transportation master plan. So not only does this property have frontage on one collector, but it's got frontage on two collectors, which is an important thing to note. As we look at the proposed comp plan change, there's a lot of things there's a lot of little weird intricacies in our comprehensive plan. And this, well, in my opinion, is a little bit of an oversight. So probably, if we were to look at it today, and if you were to drive down this little road here, you think there's no way anyone would ever want that to be commercial. The commercial property to the north, the existing buildings there, the uses in them are what we consider low rent uses. So there's a publishing company, I think, a couple auto repair shops. I think one of the units in those is a man cave. I think it's a guy's hot rod shop for his own personal man cave, which I applaud him. I think that's fantastic. But it doesn't get any traffic. It's a 3rd Avenue on that end is a dead-end street. It is 100% what I would consider to be underdeveloped as a cross-section. I'll show you some slides of what the road looks like. With regards, so here's the project site. It's interesting to note that the entire project site today is zoned high-density residential. So it is high-density residential today. It has been since at least in the 70s. I think that was when the county zoning started, was in the 70s. So as you can see, this right here is the actual Kootenai County mapping. Designates it. This is their zoning map. This shows it as high-density residential. It's this piece here and this piece here. So as you look down, what does the street section look like? It is unimproved along our frontage. There's some curb on the opposite side, but it's gravel across our frontage. So this is looking east on 3rd Avenue. So you can see some fairly architecturally unattractive buildings on the north side. I think this right here is one of the auto shops. And this is the intersection at Pinion Park Road. And you can see that there's no curb on the north side and that it hasn't been developed. And so upon any building permit, that would be widened on the south side, paved all the way across. That way we get way better fire access, emergency access. We have pedestrian facilities. And it is true that if we were to back up and look at this area along here, and also on the north side, there are no pedestrian facilities. And that's really, really unfortunate. Those are sins of the past. Those are things that probably should have happened when either that subdivision happened or when this commercial development happened, and it didn't. I don't know why. I don't have a good explanation for that. I don't understand why it was not allowed. Maybe, I don't know, but maybe there's some sort of a cash out that happened, and maybe there are some funds sitting somewhere in a city coffer that might be available for that. I don't know. I certainly hope so. It's also important to note that this area here is part of the adjacent areas that are already in the city are inside the Eastern Post Falls Urban Renewal District. And it was designated as the Eastern Post Falls Urban Renewal District. And one of the criteria that was part of the designation was that it was considered deteriorated. And I know that if you were to take your best friends from out of town, your college buddies that flew in from wherever, and drive them around to Post Falls, this was not part of our community that you would probably drive them through and brag about. This is not the cream to the cream of the city of Post Falls or even our community. I mean, granted, it's not in the city of Post Falls, but it's surrounded. So this is part of the island. And so, as we look at this, this is an opportunity. This property has been owned, like I said, by the Savory family for quite a long time. And this is now an opportunity. They're taking the opportunity to annex it into the city so that they can develop it. Interestingly enough, if City of Post Falls has got some really cool GIS, and if you go to the front counter down the hall and start clicking through some of the layers, you will see an economic layer that it's an entire map of the City of Post Falls, and it has taxable value per square foot. And if you go through the entire city and you look at all those properties, and there's net and there's gross, which means with homeowners exemption and without homeowners exemption, you will find that amongst the highest price per square foot properties are multifamily. The highest, in fact, I think, is the senior care facility next to Walmart. It's one of the highest taxable values per square foot in the city of Post Falls. And throughout the city, you will see that consistently the multifamily properties are in that high tax bracket, that high taxable value. Mayor, I think you mentioned about the school district. So, and I'm just going to throw some rough numbers out there. So I just did some quick calculations. So this is 8 acres, and at 18 units per acre, that's 144 units. Multifamily apartments today's date, are valued at between $100,000 and $120,000 a unit. It costs $100,000 and $120,000 per unit to build a 3-story apartment building at 18 units per acre. That's $17 million of taxable value. That's what you're going to get, or that's what could happen. So when we talk about impact in school districts, it's really important to note that today, taxable value on that property is way less. And school districts get a lot of their money based on taxable value. And so, and I don't have any apartment numbers with me. I wasn't prepared to bring any, but when it comes to the fact is that there is a lower percentage per unit of students coming from apartment buildings than from single-family residential. And that's for a lot of reasons, but vast majority of it is that the populations of people that live in apartments are people like my coworkers. So recent graduates from college, young engineers are just out of college. They don't know where they want to live yet, but they got a pretty good job and they haven't accumulated enough stuff to need a garage to put it all in. And they haven't settled down yet and haven't had kids. But by the time youth generally have kids, get married, and the kids start to get to school age, they change from an apartment. If they're going to still be in the rental community, they end up going to either a rental house, a duplex, a triplex, someplace with a yard, or they buy a house. And so the vast majority of students end up coming from single-family residential, not from apartments, especially on a per-unit basis. It's quite a bit less. Going on, this right here are some photos. So Pinion Park Road is tiny. It is dilapidated. Any work that we'll do on the site will vastly improve Pinion Park Road, both from a capacity standpoint, safety standpoint, widening on our side. And those are just site photos. You got an old tractor tire out here. I don't know what year that Cadillac is, but it's probably a classic now. There's another site photo from Maplewood Street. Again, not the crown jewel of Post Falls. And so here's an opportunity to annex it into the city of Post Falls and to inject some money and invest some money into our community. And really important to note that even though the surrounding properties are in the urban renewal district, this is not. And it would not be unless for some reason the urban renewal district decided to annex it, and we're not asking for that. So it would not be in the urban renewal district. So there's no tax increment financing going on, and so that would end up, all the tax value of up to $17 million would end up, being available for city projects and et cetera. With regards to the comprehensive plan change, is commercial zoning correct for the northern part of this property? And it's not. So that is probably the absolute worst place for it. So this is considered a deteriorated area of the city of Post Falls. There's a lot of vacant commercial land in the vicinity, and there's no reason to add to a supply that has very little demand. Matter of fact, the opposite should be true. If we were to annex and zone this as multifamily, it would add people within close walking distance for the commercial properties that are just right down the road at Ross Point Road and 3rd Avenue, give people walking distance, availability to bring commercial retail, commercial services to the area, give them a reason. So is residential R3 the correct zoning? Yes. So right now it's high density residential zoning, and that allows in the county, which allows 14.5 units per acre. The recent residential development pattern in this vicinity is multifamily, and it does serve as a buffer between the railroad tracks and the light industrial type properties to the north and the existing single family residence in Pine Villa to the south. And it's also important to note that it is across a major collector from these houses, and not only is it across the road, but it's across the road from their backyards. So they all got fences along there. And so I would venture to say that anything in that area, development, new, would be an upgrade from what it is today. And especially if you look at the quality of multifamily apartments that are starting to happen, the quality is fantastic. If you start looking around, so all of these apartments, they realize that the people are on 1-year leases. And if people don't like the amenities of the place that they're in, they leave, and they go to the next best place. And so you have to compete, and you have to have the amenities, and you have to have the things, the clubhouse and the little park and the little, sometimes little play structure and things like that, the barbecues, the meeting areas in the back. Those are all the things that they shoot for. So is it compatible with traffic patterns? So I know it's anecdotal, and I'm running low on time, so I'll go through this pretty quickly. Right the day before the previous public hearing, it was a Monday, 7:30 in the morning. I drove around that vicinity. So should be prime time for people going to work to be at work at 8. And I understand that it's anecdotal, but I had no problem at Ross Point Road in Maplewood. I had one car in front of me, turned right in a couple seconds, not a big deal. At Celtice Way and Ross Point Road, I sat through the traffic signal. I didn't even have to sit through one. It was just there for a couple seconds, light turned green, queue all the way went through. Well, until we got to the on-ramp at I-90, where there was any sort of a backup. Thank you, Raftrum. And it's also important to note that as we were looking at this, as you look at the property, and so even if Maplewood is a major collector and will handle a lot of the traffic, they also have the back route onto 3rd Avenue, which will get them out, and which has very, very little traffic on it. And they also have the opportunity to go east and come out on Cedar and pop over to Coeur d'Alene that way. Is the zoning compatible with existing development and future land uses? Yes, it's also compatible with the future land use map partially, and if you approve the comp plan change, it would be appropriate then as well. And are there any geographic or natural features that would prohibit it? And the answer to that is no. That would prohibit it? No. Everything is fine. It's relatively flat and very suitable. Yes, sir.
Time. Thank you.
Any questions?
Any questions, Mr. Kimball? Thanks, Ray.
I'll let you take care of that, John.
Wishing to speak in opposition, Mr. Flowers.
Bob Flowers, 3914 East Maplewood. And with all respect to Mr. Kimball, he's darn lucky he got out there on Ross Point Road the way he did. We have quite a traffic problem. That's why I respect the folks on the north side of the freeway. The 41 turns into Ross Point. And we have a lot of the same problems, especially now that school has started. This afternoon, I came home following, I think it was 4 school buses and a line of traffic that you would not have believed down Ross Point. Should this area be annexed? Yes, I'm all for city infill. I'd love to get a lot of those little areas filled in. Should it be multifamily? As he described, a 3-story multifamily high-density unit? No. Folks, go down there and look. Sure, it's not overdeveloped. It's got trees on it. My, North Idaho and trees. It's a great concept. 3rd Street. Okay, they can get out 3rd Street if they improve that road. Where does it drop them? Right back on Ross Point Road. They go down south to Maplewood. Where does Maplewood drop onto? Ross Point Road. An area that right now, 320 foot from my property, they're developing 26 duplexes right now. We do not know the impact that added traffic is going to put in. The way it's designed, it is dropping all the traffic from that development right onto Ross Point Road, a road that is already overcrowded, overused. Ponderosa is just straight south. I mean, the schools, the families, they use that road. They use Ross Point Road, and they use Ridgewood to get to Ponderosa from Celtice. And it's overcrowded now. I do not know how to quite describe it. I know that the city or somebody has done a couple traffic studies there recently. I've seen the tubes out across the road. Not aware of what the results were at the time. It was before school started. But now the school's back in, that traffic is crazy going up and down there, and you can sit there for quite a while. Once you get on Ross Point Road to try to get across Celtice, you can be sitting there a long ways, and that traffic backs almost all the way up to Maplewood from Celtice at a lot of times. It should not be multifamily. It just should not be right there. We don't have the capacity. We don't even know what these duplexes are going to do to our road right now. And everything else to the west and to the south is all single-family residential. That's all Ross Point, or not Ross Point, I'm sorry, Pine Villa.
Thanks, Bob.
Yep.
Rebuttal.
Again, Ray Kimball for the record. I mentioned my experience with regards to traffic there is anecdotal because it is in fact that. I don't place a whole lot of weight on it. What I do place a lot of weight on is the fact that the City of Post Falls has a transportation master plan. And the City of Post Falls hired an expert consultant to put together a traffic master plan. And as part of that, they collected traffic data throughout the entire city. And I know I read the traffic master plan, the new one that came out, and I admit I did not thumb through the 2,000 pages of appendices of the actual traffic study, but it's there. I thumbed through it. I looked at different things, saw what it was, and I think it's really important to note that my experience was anecdotal. Mr. Flowers lives there. Many of you may drive through that all the time on your daily commute. City has hired experts who are experts in the field to do the traffic studies, to understand the traffic in the vicinity, and to account for traffic impact fees, to deal with any traffic mitigation that happens as a part of development. And I think it's really important that as a city council and as a community that we weigh that as expert testimony, that we have a transportation master plan that was prepared by experts, that was reviewed by Rob Paulus, who I personally consider to be an expert in transportation in the city of Post Falls. And so when a staff report says that we have, as a city, capacity to handle a zoning of this designation, I think we should lend a lot of credence to that. And with regards to what Mr. Flowers says, yeah, it should be in the city. It's an island, yeah, absolutely, it should be, but not R3. Well, what should it be then? Should it be commercial? Should we add to a large amount of undeveloped commercial in the area? That's irresponsible. Should it be single-family residential? Not if we want to have encourage any sort of more development in the vicinity. It's already zoned high-density residential in the county. Why would single-family work there? In fact, I think it's probably the most prudent thing for the city to do would be to take this as an opportunity to take a deteriorated part of the city of Post Falls and take the opportunity to say, yeah, this is an area that is adjacent to an urban renewal district that we're trying to inject money into, and we're trying to get people to go here and get businesses, and this is happening organically right next door and will only fuel the adjacent developments, so in the commercial area. And it's important to note, that's a really walkable area. So, yeah, I understand that there's not sidewalks, but 3rd Avenue doesn't have a lot of traffic. So it's not as if it's a high traffic area. So is it something that the city of Post Falls should do? Yes, I do. I think it should be. I think the comp plan change makes sense. And I think annexation and zoning at R3 definitely makes sense. And it's probably, if you were to look at it and think to yourself, what should it be? What should it not be? I think you're going to come to the conclusion that R3 is the right thing. And thank you.
Close the public hearing. Council, who would like to start? Joe.
Probably won't be surprising that location, just off the map is the aforementioned dysfunction junction, which I do, that is part of my daily commute. So I've got 2 options, Cedar up to Celtice over to the light there, which is often I have to wait 2 rounds of that light to turn right onto 41 before I got to wait 2 rounds of the light to turn left on the freeway. Or I can take Maplewood over to Ross Point and go up and sit 2 or 3 rounds of that light before I can go across and then wait a couple rounds of the light to turn left onto the freeway. That's between 7 and 7:15 in the morning, every morning. There are no plans that I'm aware of at all to widen Ross Point Road south of Celtice Way. The plans to fix the intersection of Celtice and I-90 and Highway 41, we're talking 2023. So, and this is 8.4 acres if I read the packet right, so that's 151 units potentially, with 2+ cars per unit, and they're all going to be going that way. So, again, I don't know if we should or if it's imprudent to deal with the comp plan amendment and the annexation separately. I think you're right. Commercial there doesn't make any sense. I walked down 3rd Street for the first time just a couple of years ago at that spot, and that's not commercial. That's not commercial area. So residential doesn't make sense. Does it make sense now? No, it might in 2023 when all that stuff is done. And even then, there's going to be serious problems on the south end of Celtice Way because, unless Rob can tell me something different, I don't think there's any plans to expand that. So. Thanks.
Steve.
I agree the zoning should be changed because if you look out there now, you don't really know 3rd Street's a street. So nobody's ever going to build commercial, so I think it should be rezoned. I feel a little bit different on Maplewood. I see the improvements that we have at the corner now because I drive Maplewood quite a bit, that where the duplexes are, there's now a sidewalk, grassy swell, so you can get off of Maplewood, and every little bit of Maplewood that's improved makes it a little bit nicer. I see people jogging it quite a bit, riding bikes, and right now that property is an eyesore. It's got a lot of issues with it, so I think it's an infield project. It's between Riverside Harbor and the city of Post Falls, and it's just kind of an island out there, but I think it's a start of cleaning that area up a little bit. That's my thoughts.
I guess my biggest concern is whether or not we want it in the city or not. Right now, it's high-density multifamily in the county, so if the person wants to develop it, they can develop it as high density now. Am I correct in that?
They can't get sewer.
Can't get sewer.
Well, they can't get sewer.
That's why they want it in the city.
That's why they're limited.
I guess when I looked at it, number one, comp plan, if we decide to annex it in, yeah, we need to change the comp plan, make it residential. For that area, I don't know what else you'd do with it, other than multifamily. I don't think it fits very well with single family, so then we come back to the issue that Councilman Malloy brings up, and that's the traffic. And then, as Ray pointed out, got these studies. I guess whether the studies are right or the wrong, the traffic should work there. I don't drive it often enough to know one way or another.
If I can comment on the studies, those are often done by folks that, does First Street in downtown Seattle work? Yeah, if you don't mind waiting at stoplights forever. But it works, traffic gets through. Do we want that here? I don't.
Okay.
Anybody else?
I'm going to agree with Alan Wolfe on this. I think that the only thing that really makes sense there is to change the comp plan, annex it in, and from where it is sitting, the kind of rustic commercial that it is just to the south of, I don't think that there's any other use for it except for multifamily. I feel like it's a little bit different situation. I know it's going to impact the traffic down there. Of course, any kind of building will impact the traffic, but I think it's a little bit different situation than on the north side of Celtice. I'm going to be in favor of it, so that's
Any other
where I'm at.
comments? Thanks, Linda.
I guess the only other thing I would add is, does it improve the city of Post Falls by having this piece of property within the city of Post Falls? I'm not so sure it does.
Unless you want to put a value on the, and I don't look at it this way, but the potential tax revenue, but I never look at it from that perspective.
I don't either. So I guess that's, when it's all said and done, I guess I go back to what Joe was saying, and, it's like, so the guy owns a piece of property that's in the county that he can't put sewer on. That's not my problem. I don't know that this is really benefiting Post Falls. Steve, you got something to say on that?
It doesn't improve Post Falls. If you look at it, though, people think it is Post Falls when they drive in. They don't know that's county to city. So I think, anything you can do along Maplewood to clean that up between Cedar and Ross Point is an improvement.
Okay.
To me.
I just don't know if adding that much traffic on roads that, waiting more than 2 rounds of a stoplight every morning, I don't think improves the city of Post Falls, whether it's in city limits or not.
Any other comments? Someone want to float a motion?
I'm going to move to approve Savory Annexation Comp Plan Amendment, file number ANNX-006-2019 and CPA-002-2019.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Thoreson?
Aye.
Wolfe?
Nay.
Malloy?
Nay.
Anthony?
Aye.
Borders?
Nay.
Wilhelm?
Aye.
First time.
Fair gets to make a decision.
First time in 5.5 years.
Pressure's
You're
on.
welcome.
Wow. It's a tough one. You've got a piece of property that's, we talk about trying to annex or trying to eliminate county pockets. And Mr. Malloy, I share your comments on traffic because I drive Coeur d'Alene every day and I come home on Northwest Boulevard every day. And you do, you wait 2 or 3 lights and you try to figure out how to time it, et cetera. The other thing that's tough for me is that, I said it earlier, it's multifamily, but I'm going to agree with the comments made that if it is annexed in, I don't know what other use, what other zoning would be a better fit for it. So, in light of the fact that county pocket, we could eliminate a county pocket. I don't know what other better use it is, and even though I'm not a multifamily fan, I would vote aye in favor of this. So the motion would pass. Fourth, everybody okay to go right into the fourth public hearing? You want to take a few minutes?
Let's do this.
Do it? Okay. So the fourth public hearing tonight is the State Highway 41 Seward Hope to Prairie subsequent user fee, and I'll open the public hearing.
Honorable Mayor, members of the council, Robert Paulus, Assistant City Engineer. Back in 2016, Hem Street Development Corporation installed approximately a half-mile of sanitary sewer along State Highway 41 from just south of Hope Avenue up to Prairie Avenue. In June of 2018, City Council directed city staff to move forward on preparing an analysis of how to distribute or put together a subsequent user agreement and to organize the public hearing for consideration of a subsequent user fee. A public hearing was originally scheduled in September of 2018 and then was canceled at the last second due to some late information that was brought forward. A rescheduling of it was made, and tonight we have that public hearing. A quick review of subsequent user fees covered under City Code 13.40. They are to address equity of costs borne from the consequence of extending services or access. That means utilities or roadways to a property. They are not intended to provide payment when extensions are part of the orderly continuation of development patterns, and eligible costs are for design, construction, and land acquisition. Overhead or administration fees of the developer are ineligible. Fees are fixed by resolution after completion of a fee analysis. As stated, the fee analysis was originally completed in August of 2018. It was revised and updated in August of 2019. An initial term of a subsequent user fee, if adopted by City Council, is for 5 years, and City Council has the option for continuing it in additional periods after that 5 years, if City Council so chooses. Fees are collected at the time of subdivision or building permit, or with new or changed land use when property is attached to the sanitary sewer. Historically, we have only had one subsequent user fee adopted, and that was back in 2006 with the Knapp subdivision. No fees were ever collected with that. This map shows the constructed section of sanitary sewer back in 2016, the green line, which came off of a sewer line constructed in 2005 with a local improvement district. The applicant's property is on the northeast, or the bluish-green project proponent property on the far right side of the screen. There are 16 parcels which were identified in the fee analysis for consideration and being benefited by the sewer that was constructed. You have the applicant's property, and then the remaining 14 properties. All total, there's 135.89 acres. Eligible project costs after reviewing the costs that were submitted to staff was $336,514.17. This cost was lower than what the cost estimate was in the construction improvement agreement for the project. When we took the total cost and divided it by the number of acres, we came out with a fee of $2,476.37 per acre. This is a little bit small, but I will talk you through it. This is a map of the service basins in the area and was put together with the Northeast Quadrant analysis, which was an update to the city's water reclamation plan several years ago. The red is the constructed sewer. To the west of Highway 41, and the sewer is along Highway 41, we have the Tullamore lift station and the Tullamore subdivision. All of the Tullamore subdivision goes to the Tullamore lift station. None of the flows from that pump into the sewer that was constructed. It would therefore not be eligible for making any payments to help offset the cost. Properties north of Prairie Avenue and west of Highway 41 will also be served by the Tullamore lift station. Also, those properties would not be eligible for assisting with the cost of the sewer that was installed. On the east side, we have 3 areas. They are identified as the northeast area, which is the purple on the screen, and then we have the Meyer alternate north and south. Those sections are served by a future line that's going to be going along Fennicus Road, and none of those areas will be serviced by the line that was installed, and so they would not be eligible to help offset the cost. So we've got the constructed sewer, and then showing you the identified impact area that does drain into that newly constructed sewer. Again, subsequent user fees are for initial 5-year time frame. Fees are to be paid at the time of land development. There are 4 parcels in the identified area which are in the county. If a subsequent user fee was established, those parcels would be identified as, if they were to be annexed into the city of Post Falls, we would try to make them part of the payback period. And properties, There are some properties that are not reimbursable. The proponent cannot get reimbursement for the properties they own, and there was an agreement between the proponent and 3 other parcels that sewer was to be provided to them, so those 3 parcels would not pay a subsequent user fee. The map on the left shows all of the parcels identified. This is the same map that was in the published notice in the newspaper, except I've added a little bit of color. The bluish color are the 3 properties that were subject to a previous agreement with the proponent, and the 2 properties on the far north in green are the proponent's property. The spreadsheet that you cannot read on the right, that takes all the properties in that area. We look at their parcel number, the acreage that is for each of those, and then we divide the cost through that, and that's where we came up with the $2,416.37. The requested action is at the completion of the public hearing, and this will be continued on to October, is for City Council to give staff direction as to whether or not to proceed with formation of a resolution establishing a subsequent user fee, and whether or not prior to that, if you need any modifications to the area boundary, affected parties in the area, or the fee analysis itself. Before turning it over to the proponent, I stand for any questions you might have.
Questions, Rob?
Rob, hasn't this already been done?
There's a number of steps in order to do this. We were before you early in 2018, and we discussed most of these slides that you saw, and we had to justify to you and get your approval to move forward to do a fee analysis.
Okay.
That allowed us to go through the fine numbers as to which parcels, take a look at the sewage drainage basins, take a look at the costs from the proponent, make sure those were good, and come back with what was viewed as the most fair and equitable way to distribute those fees. And at that time, you also said that we could move forward with the public hearing. As stated earlier, we attempted to do that in the fall of 2018. That fell through, and so we are here with you tonight.
Thank you.
Any questions, Rob? Thank you, Rob.
I'll now turn it over to the proponent, Mr. Randy Clarno. This one here? Okay.
Mayor and members of the council, my name is Randy Clarno. My address is 7440 East Pinnacle Peak Road, Scottsdale, Arizona 85255. I'm also the manager of the LLC that initially acquired most of these properties that Rob pointed to in green and blue in this map. We acquired the properties in, I believe it was 05 and 06, and the intent at that time was to do a master plan that included commercial and residential development. We were approached by several commercial developers, some locally, some nationally, that were interested in these parcels, and we subsequently made a deal to sell some of that to them, but there was a condition that we provide water, sewer, and other dry utility services to those sites. And when I say dry utilities, I'm talking about gas, fiber optic, telecommunications, and so forth. So we prepared to do that. We concluded the sale to those individuals, and those sales were based on those services being provided to them. We subsequently prepared to put that work in the ground, and then the Great Recession came along. So we all agreed to stop and not go any further. Then in 2016, some 9-10 years later, we put those utilities in the ground per our obligation. And that included sewer, and included dry utilities, and it included water. We have installed water all the way up 41 to Prairie, and then from Prairie west over to Charville. So we've made a substantial investment in infrastructure, public infrastructure, about $900,000 for all of this. As a part of those agreements that we concluded with those commercial developers, they were not subject to any later charges for that because of the purchase price that was involved. So at the end, what's happened is we have some properties that have direct benefit to that, and I'm sure they realize some added value and some opportunity. When they exercise that opportunity is clearly up to them. But we believe that it's fair that, we recoup some of that cost and that we utilize the ordinance that you have in place to do that. And so we're asking that you direct staff to go to the next step with a resolution to prepare the subsequent user fee resolution to be able to collect those fees when those folks proceed with development. With that, I'll take any questions you have.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you, sir. Anyone wishing to speak, Deborah? One wishing to speak, Mr. Eberlein, and you don't say if you're in favor, in opposition, or neutral, so come down and give your name for the record and surprise us. Good to see you, Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councilman. I'm impressed. I haven't seen anybody sleeping here this evening, and I know I certainly would have struggled with that at some point in time in this proceeding for me. I think the NAP project is probably a pretty good bellwether as to why council hasn't typically done this. Full disclosure, one of the proponents of this project is a past client of mine who we did quite a bit of work for. The most onerous part of this that I find, properties number 9, number 10, number 11, number 12, and number 13 are private residences. They, at this point in time, they're expecting to remain that way. The other parcels are all for sale or for development. And so the biggest complaint that I would have about this, you would want to talk to your legal counsel because parcels 10, 11, 12, and 13 are within the county. They're not within the city. And so could city ordinance have an effect upon property owners who are not within the city limits of Post Falls? I wouldn't expect to have to piggyback or to steal some of the work or the benefit that an individual put out to put the sewer system in. If I was to develop my property to choose to do so, I own 2 parcels there. Actually, I represent EFT Trust, who owns 2 parcels there. If I wanted to double my property taxes and annex into the city of Post Falls, I would do it in order that I could develop it. That's not on the radar at this point in time. So those parcels, 9, 10, 11, and 12, they're not intending to develop their properties. All the rest of them are. And I would expect that at some point, as soon as it's financially reasonable, they will probably choose to hook up to the sewer. I've dropped a lot of peanuts on the road for people to pick up when I'm doing a project, and I suspect that that's exactly what's happened with this. There was profits made in order to make this deal go through. They had to put a sewer system in or the property would have never sold. Therefore, I suspect that this request is an afterthought after having reviewed the codes of the city of Post Falls. But I would ask, at the very least, in your decision, that if somebody in your code, I can pull this thing out. You guys got it. I think it's 3450, 050, and 060, that it talks about before you can do anything, before you can get a building permit issued, that you must pay for the sewer system hookup, depending upon how much property that you own. If somebody's not doing something that requires them to hook up to the sewer system, I would ask that you issue the building permit, make an exemption for those 3 properties, for those 3 parcels that have residences on them. The other ones, I suspect they will all be hooking up to the sewer at some point in time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Also, I just handed another one, does not wish to speak, correct? Serge Artemenko, did I say that right? Yeah. And he states, if I need to improve my land use and build more units, then I would use the sewer, but you state that you are in opposition, correct? Thank you. So does the proponent wish to rebut?
Randy Clarno. I can't speak to the legal issues that he raised. I'm sure your counsel can talk about that. But I can say that, you know, we are the original developers of Prairie Properties, of these properties that we described. We're also the original developers of Tullamore. And I can say that we didn't make $1 on any of this. In fact, we lost millions because the Great Recession hit us really hard. So it's not about profit, and it's not an afterthought, because this was discussed with the city before we put these, or committed to put these utilities in. So we were hoping that this tool was available. We saw that it was available, and so we proceeded on that basis. So I can't speak to when these property owners will annex or develop. They have sewer, they have water that they didn't have before 2016. And so they, you know, sellers, I deal with a lot of sellers. We've developed over 90 projects in 25 years in 4 states throughout the Northwest. And, you know, sellers one day are not sellers, and then 2 months later they're sellers for whatever reason, family issues or the market or whatever. So the benefit's there for them. We're just asking for an equitable reimbursement of that benefit that they realized.
Thank you. Mr. Wilson, do I now suspend the public hearing, or do we take deliberation? Do we hear comments? What's the...
So at this point, if that's the end of the testimony for tonight, we would continue the hearing until, make sure I get the date right. It's until October 1st, 2019 at 6 p.m. At our next council meeting, we'd reconvene the hearing at that point in time. You would do your deliberations and reach a decision at that point.
We don't need a motion per se, we
would need a motion to continue the hearing.
Okay.
I would move to continue this Highway 41 sewer Hope to Prairie subsequent user fee to October 1st, 2019 at 6 p.m.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion. Deborah, please take the roll.
Wilhelm.
Aye.
Borders.
Aye.
Anthony.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Wolfe.
Aye.
Thoreson.
Aye.
The motion passes. The public hearing will be continued. Next item. Okay. We're going to take about a 3-minute break. Is that right? Meeting.
We're going to see public hearing people.
Call the meeting back to order. Next item up is the Downtown District Update and ULI Recap, which is under unfinished business.
Council and Mr. Mayor, I wanted to bring a kind of an update to you, staff report regarding the Urban Land Institute presentation that they did on the 27th of August, as well as just kind of a touch base with you where we're at with the potential downtown urban renewal district. So as I noted, on August 27th, there was a presentation that most or all of you were able to make it to, put on by the Urban Land Institute of Idaho, which included various representatives from towns or agencies throughout the state of Idaho to discuss downtown developments as well as how they can happen within an urban renewal district. Some of the primary summary pieces that came out of this meeting related to why is it important to build a downtown and what does the city stand to gain from doing so. What is the relationship between private and public investment for downtown creation and revitalization? Transportation and parking, change, planning, and public involvement, as well as urban renewal district informational pieces. In the creation of a downtown, what they find, the primary points that they looked at or that were discussed at the meeting had to do with the fact that downtowns attract young adults and are a factor in whether they return to their hometowns after leaving for college or job development and training. Again, it's a place where you want to live, work, and play. Downtowns give residents and visitors a place to go and a place to and a way to establish a sense of community and place. They talked about the people need a third place. A third place comes from the idea that the first place is home, second place is work, and a third place is a place to go within the community. Downtowns also efficiently use infrastructure for economic development. Investment in downtown is an efficient use of tax dollars and more fiscally responsible way to grow the tax base because it utilizes existing infrastructure. And they touched upon downtown and compact development can help preserve rural and open space by preventing sprawl. And again, that's taking advantage of the existing infrastructure within a downtown. Another point that was addressed between during the presentations as well as the Q&A was the relationship between private and public investment for a downtown creation and revitalization. The growth through private investment in downtowns either happens in tandem with or shortly following public investment in placemaking. As we can kind of note and look at Spokane Street, where the public improvement was done with the lighting and the boulevard styles, we've started seeing development along there with the new creation of Sawmill Grill and the Rogers and the brewery, along with other investments that are on the way. Public agencies set the vision and tone of a place, which is expressed through the creation of public spaces. Investment in these spaces encourages buy-in from the public sector. Private developers often will piggyback on visions set and help implement the remainder with the public. In the City of Caldwell's case, public investment in the Indian Creek Plaza led to an addition of 5 restaurants and the filling of many vacant commercial spaces in their downtown. Another part that they touched upon was the transportation and parking, the all too important subject that we continually come across. It's important to identify the purpose of streets, commerce, versus roads, which is an efficient movement of cars. And then we align street and road design with the intended use. Good street design accommodates people and vehicles and has the flexibility to host a variety of uses at various times of the day. So we're talking about the street, the sidewalk, the interaction with the business places. Creating parking in Caldwell, another example, along the rail line was accomplished via partnership with Union Pacific. There wasn't a lease. The city paid for all improvement and manages and pays the maintenance of that site. This was kind of an example as to how to accommodate additional off-street parking as needed. They talked about change and planning and public involvement. Part of the statement that we found throughout the process was you can't decide if your city will change, but you can decide how it will change. Define what makes or will make your community unique and celebrate that. Keep it simple but visionary. Involve the public in each process. Constantly communicate the vision and objective. To weather the inevitable real estate and economic cycles, keep a laser focus on your vision until it gains traction. Encourage everyone to show up to public meetings. Use social media to engage and communicate. Again, this is the planning process, is continually maintaining constant communication with the public, involving them as much as possible throughout each iteration of a plan or the implementation of the plan. Working with them is the best way to achieve our goals. Finally, they noted, it was discussed that urban renewal districts with an urban renewal strategy has changed from how it was originally done in the past. There's no longer the program of bulldozing buildings, such as even Boise did in the 80s and early 90s. Being included in an urban renewal area gives you access to funding to help resolve issues in your community. And during the urban renewal district planning, you can start with a larger study area and finish with a smaller boundary. This was brought up, I believe Mr. Wolfe had brought up that point, was we have a large area that we are proposing at this time, and that's what we are currently operating under, but if we do need to address those boundaries, they kind of noted that yes, you can absolutely change the boundaries as you go through the process. Those were the primary issues that were discussed and presented at that Urban Land Institute hearing meeting. As we move forward with the creation of the urban renewal district, we are looking to update the 2005 City Center Plan. This would be looking at the plan itself, seeing what has been completed, what projects have been completed, what projects remain, and if there are any projects that were not thought of at that time. Part of the request from my staff report noted that we were looking for direction to look to hire a consultant to help us address this 2005 master plan, to bring it a little bit more into the current and review the projects that have been completed and how it affects moving forward. Again, we've had two different comp plans, one that's nearly completed, both of which have supported the reasoning behind a downtown or city center plan and how it is moving forward. And we anticipate that we will see a similar response as we have had in 2005 and with the later comp plans, including the one that we are going to be presenting to you in a few weeks. We will also be doing a build-out analysis, a feasibility study, and drafting the urban renewal plan over the next 6 to 8 months. We are scaling back our intentions. We were originally hoping to get this urban renewal district established and hopefully approved during the 2019 year. However, based on just the complications of the timing, we have decided to scale that back and proceed to aim for an early to mid 2020 adoption. Any questions?
Bob, this is designated as a action item?
Yes.
So we need, that would be to approve.
Approve us moving forward with updating the 2005 City Center Plan.
Any comments?
I'm good with that.
Entertain a motion.
I'd move to approve moving forward with updating the 2005 City Center Plan.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion. Roll call, please.
Wilhelm?
Aye.
Borders?
Aye.
Anthony?
Aye.
Malloy?
Abstain.
Wolfe?
Aye.
And Thoreson?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, thanks, Bob. Next item is citizens' issue, and this section of the agenda is reserved for citizens wishing to address the council regarding a city-related issue that is not on the agenda. Please come forward and give your name for the record, and we'll have the timer up here for you to look at. Thanks for being patient and waiting.
Good evening, Mayor and council people. My name is Sharon Alexander. I am a lifelong Idahoan and Post Falls girl. My husband and I live in the garden community on Syringa and Poline. We and 10 other people that reside in our area are having problems with the noise coming from cars, trucks, and motorcycles on Poline. We can't even sit out in our backyard at any time of the day or evening. We live between two roundabouts. One is to the right behind our house. The other roundabout is on the area of Idaho Street. In our minds, the roundabouts are mini racetracks for the goofballs that sign up, and the sign that says 15 miles an hour, they do not obey. What a joke. I'm sorry about the roundabouts. The other roundabout, like I said, is on Idaho Street. Our backyard is a noise zone. We have to use the roundabout to come out of our area no matter which direction we go, whether we go west or whether we go east, we still have to come out on Syringa to get around there. We are suggesting that maybe you can put some speed bumps out there. Maybe that will stop it. The other roundabout that's by our house, when we cross the street to whether we go for a walk or we go over to, say, the Legion, because my husband volunteers over there, people do not stop for us. They don't stop whether we're driving or whether we are walking. So we are taking our lives in danger because people are very disrespectful or rude. Sometimes they even flip you off because you're in the wrong area. I feel that with the amount of growth that has come on that area, the traffic is getting larger and the noise is, affecting us in our houses that we bought there. We would like the city to take a look at this. I don't know how you're going to do it, but we feel that we need some help up there. I agree with the other people that were talking about the growth on 16th. Sometimes we take 16th to go up to Hutter and go down to catch saltese. I employ these people because I feel for them, because we're feeling the same impact. We have 3 schools within that area. We have the high school, we have Prairie View, and we have now Greens Ferry. Everybody is using Poline. So I hope that you will take this into account. Do a study. I don't care what you do, but we need some help up there to stop this. We can't do anything. We can't run up and jump over our walls to say, stop, you idiot, or get a license plate. It just doesn't work. So we are asking that you give us some help on that road. Thank you.
Ma'am. Shall you work with Chief and our streets, our engineering, see what we can do? Someone will be in touch with you.
Can I ask
Go ahead.
Mrs. Alexander a question? Because that's a road I'm familiar with too. What would you suggest? You said speed bumps, which you can't really do
Okay,
that.
well, I guess that's
So
an
if
arterial.
too
That's
much
an arterial that goes to a high school, it goes to an elementary, and it goes to 41. I guess our feeling is, why was there a roundabout put in there? Maybe years ago it might have been great because, these are farming roads. I grew up here. I know what was here. And to put these roundabouts in areas like that is just wrong.
I only smiled. I have to stop you.
Okay.
I only smiled. Because there's really no secret that I'm not a fan of roundabouts either. So I wasn't smiling.
No, I know you weren't. I know. So, my husband suggested putting some speed bumps up there. We've seen the speed sign. Sorry to say, that just gives them more action to speed a little faster, see if they can get there, when you put up the speed clock sign. So we need some help up there.
We'll have staff take a look and someone will be in contact. Steve, you had a question?
I got a question for Rob. I work at the hospital and they installed the crosswalks across Ironwood there, and those have been hugely successful. The people do obey those. It slowed the traffic down on Ironwood almost where people aren't speeding by. It's really slowed it down, made it a lot safer. And I drive Celtice twice every day, sometimes 3 or 4 times. In those crosswalks, the signals there seem to be working too, because I noticed the people from the apartments going down to Mill River. It makes those roundabouts a lot safer. Is it feasible to put especially where those are school walking routes, to put those signalized crosswalks in there, because they do slow down traffic, and people do obey them. But if you don't have them there, it's a raceway to see who can get there first to beat
The rectangular rapid flashing beacons that you're referring to that Coeur d'Alene put in on their roundabouts, yes, those could be added to roundabouts. Each leg of the intersection, you're looking somewhere between $6,000 to $8,000, so about $24,000 to $32,000 per roundabout to put those in on all legs.
Okay.
It would be a matter of putting an item into the budget and looking at getting the monies to do that, but right now there is no budgetary line item for doing those type of improvements.
Okay. It just seems on the safe walking routes for schools, that would make sense. Right now.
And until this last year, rectangular rapid flashing beacons, there were some provisions that would have prevented us from utilizing them. We are now in a position where we can utilize them in Post Falls again.
Thanks, Rob. Appreciate it. Ma'am, someone will get back to you.
Thank you, Rob.
Thanks for bringing it up. Please.
Thank you all, Chair. I'm Larry Spencer. I live in Post Falls. I have for a few years now. I'm going to ask that you consider something that's a little unorthodox. A lot of the things that we were talking about, the board was considering, there were a lot of design standards, and there was a lot of talk of design standards. And I'd like you to imagine what would happen if a proposal came at you, but you didn't have any design standards. You had no criteria, essentially, to say yes or no, or we need the roads to be addressed, or we need this, or we need that to be properly looked at. And that's the situation that we have with something that is possibly going to come into Post Falls. There are no design standards, and that is the Department of Corrections Prison Reentry Center. There's literally nothing in the code that would make it a condition that the lighting, the proximity to schools, the proximity to residential neighborhoods, none of that is required to be addressed. There's kind of a nebulous special use permit process, but there aren't actual criteria for the design standards like you have in the rest of the code. And the reason for that is pretty simple. I think it's obvious. Apartment buildings and commercial uses are something that every city council, every planning staff envisions happening. So people are familiar with them, they look at it, they look at what works, what doesn't work, and there is extensive design standards. When you get something that's so unusual that it's simply just it's almost an anomaly that was even included as a use in the code at all of where it can be and where it can't, a lot of thought wasn't given to what kind of design standards that should be. So what I'm going to ask the council to do is take a very extraordinary step. You can't, the council's hands are tied, the city's hands are tied if a proposal comes in, they buy property and they say, here's what we bought and now we want to go ahead and go through the process of getting this permitted. The only time to keep from opening Pandora's box is before Pandora's box gets opened. The city has within its power the ability to adopt as an emergency ordinance a 6-month moratorium on a specific use. I would encourage the city to do that. And the reason for that is it would give 6 months for the city to look at prison release centers, it's in the code as a work release center, and say what kind of design standards, how far should this have to be from residential zones? Because if you have a house right across the street from where this thing lands, if it lands in Post Falls, you just looked at $50,000, $80,000 of value that left your property because people aren't going to want to live across the street from it. So it's going to affect a few people if it comes here very substantially. And
you know, it will affect everybody in some respect, but we really need to look at how it will affect a few people. And that's just thinking off the top of my head. There are a lot of other reasons and a lot of other things to look at. That, you know, look at other places that maybe have gone through this, and after they had one put in, what kind of problems did they have and what do they wish they could have changed? And if you adopt an emergency moratorium for 6 months, that will give planning staff time to present to council a list of ideas that could be put in and say, here's what we think we need to protect our community. Because the last thing that any council member wants is to find out that they don't have options because they didn't put rules in place before an application came in. This is something that is probably maybe a 1 out of 3 or maybe even better than 50% chance that Post Falls is going to end up being the community that's picked. And I'd really encourage the board or the council to take that extraordinary step. The other thing is you can undo it if you wish to. After 2 months, if you've looked at it and you said, well, we're comfortable with what we've got, you can remove that. But you can't start that once an application comes in. So
Thank you.
that'll stand for questions.
So,
I'm good.
good, thank you.
Interesting.
Next item up, anybody else? I don't think so. Next item up, new business tonight, we have none. Followed by ordinances and resolutions, we have none. Administrative staff reports, Mr. Paulus, transportation projects update.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the council. Almost brought up the subsequent user fee public hearing for you again. I don't think you want to do that one. There, it got moved. So tonight we heard some conversation in almost every one of your annexations about growth, and particularly related to transportation. In fact, city staff hears a number of questions on a regular basis. What's being done in the area to address transportation? What's being done to plan to take care of things? Each year, the Kootenai Metropolitan Planning Organization puts together a 6-year transportation improvement program, otherwise known as a TIP. Tonight, I'm going to give you a quick overview of the current roadway portion of the TIP, which comprises over 58 road projects in the Kootenai Metropolitan Planning area and comprises almost $250 million of investment into transportation. So a transportation improvement program, as I said, a TIP, is required under the FAST Act, which is the Fixing America's Surface Transportation Act. That's a federal requirement. The list applies to any project that has funding either from the Federal Highway Administration or the Federal Transit Administration. Tonight I'm going to be covering just the issues regarding roadways, not transit. It's a 6-year program. The Kootenai Metropolitan Planning Organization's plan has a 7th year on it, which is a preliminary year, a kind of a placeholder for projects that might have some earlier funding, but are looking for that last little bit of construction or projects that they need to have a placeholder for. It's a financially constrained project list in that the revenues going out in that 6-year period must match the revenues coming in. Once adopted, the KMPO plan is automatically adopted in the Idaho State Transportation Plan. The project funds are organized into 3 sections: preliminary engineering, also called preliminary design, right-of-way acquisition, and construction. The most current plan was approved by the Kootenai Metropolitan Planning Organization last week, Thursday. In terms of cost, over the next 6 years, there's about $216 million being spent. About $200 million of that is in construction, and you can see the rest between preliminary engineering or development and right-of-way. Sitting in preliminary for 2027, they're anticipating a need of another $285 million. Quite an investment in our area. Taking a look at the next 6 years, the first $65 million is going to be spent in 2020. After that, there's about an average of $20 million a year through 2026 being invested in transportation in Kootenai County. So, looking at the area, and in particular, more of the urbanized area. We've got a number of projects which are capacity and safety related, and a number of projects which are maintenance related. A lot of these are more of ITD projects, but there are some local projects involved as well. I'm going to start and go over to the eastern side down in Coeur d'Alene, US 95. Some of the main projects happening in the next few years is the intersection improvements, which are already under construction. The Granite North project, which runs from about Athol up to the Granite road alignment. And then we have the Ironwood to State Highway 53 signal upgrades. These projects will remove traffic signals at Bosenko Avenue and Canfield Avenue. The signal at Bosenko has already been removed. Canfield Avenue signal is scheduled for removal next year. New traffic signals will be installed at Wilbur Avenue in US 95, which is just north of Target, and then on the northern part of Hayden at Miles Avenue. In 2026, upgrades will occur to all the traffic signal equipment. They'll be putting in adaptive technology and signal cabinets that can operate even when the power goes down. Very similar technology to what we've recently put in on Mullen and Saltese Way, even though that stuff is not calibrated yet. Intersection changes, they're going to be putting in a number of turn lanes to improve side street traffic, and they will be installing curbed medians at non-signalized intersections. The first two of those have already been installed, one at Bosenko and one down at Haycraft, a little bit closer to I-90. Other changes include the reconstruction of the shared use path on the east side of US 95. The initial 8 miles from from Appleway up to the north side of Hayden is being done right now, and then the remaining 11 miles that get you up to Athol will be done in the near future. They are also constructing a sound wall down by Haycraft Avenue, and they're expanding US 95 to a 4-lane facility over Granite Hill, and then they are also building frontage roads and realigning access points along with that Granite Hill work. Tied in, overall, the cost of those 3 projects is $46.8 million. Most of it being the Granite North project. Tied in with that, on the south end, we have the interchange 430 to La Crosse Avenue improvements. That's the Northwest Boulevard and up to the very sharp curve over at La Crosse Street in Coeur d'Alene. There they will be realigning and widening US 95 to be 2 lanes in each direction. They'll be reconfiguring road alignment, putting in the center turn lane, and doing sidewalk improvements for about $12.4 million. On the far north end, we have the US 95 and State Highway 53 interchange project, which is currently under construction. This project will remove and replace the existing Union Pacific Railroad Bridge. It will eliminate the traffic signal at US 95 and 53. This will allow the 70-mile-per-hour speed limit to be moved further south, closer to Hayden. They will extend pedestrian and bicycle facilities, and they will be constructing a roundabout at Government Way and State Highway 53. The overall cost of this project is $41 million, and when it's all said and done, they'll be putting in the first single-point urban interchange, also affectionately called a SPUI, at US 95 and 53. This is a rendering of what the finished project should look like. They take all of the on-ramps and the through traffic and converge it at one point over the top of US 95. More efficient. Also, in the US 95 corridor, we have the Ramsey Road, Wyoming to Lancaster extension. The city of Hayden is extending Ramsey Road from Wyoming to Lancaster. What happened there? Somehow I moved.
You don't have to start over.
That wasn't intentional. My apologies. But anyway, they're moving and putting in a roundabout at Lancaster about a half mile west of US 95. And then, I love that bouncing picture. Okay. This project is to reduce congestion, improve local roadway circulation, and provide multimodal access. The finished project will have a 3-lane arterial roadway with a 10-foot multi-use path on one side, sidewalk on the other. It's 2.5 miles in length and has a cost of about $5.9 million. It took over 2.5 years to figure out the alignment of that road due to impacts with the landing safety areas with the airport. Moving more into our area, State Highway 41, we've already talked about this one a little bit. We've got the construction plan between 2020 and 2022. We've got new traffic signals going in at 16th Avenue, Hope Avenue, and at Lancaster Avenue up in Rathdrum. Signal equipment will also be updated. Intersection changes will increase side road capacity where we have signalized intersections, and curb medians similar to what's being put in on US 95 and Coeur d'Alene will be put at the quarter-mile marks, 12th Avenue, Horsehaven Avenue, Killdeer, etc. Other changes, we're going to construct a shared-use path on the east side of Highway 41, construct grade separation of the Union Pacific Railroad main line. This is a huge safety benefit to the area, and also remove the Union Pacific Railroad spur line crossing. Overall, this project is $54 million, of which we have $24 million being expended in Post Falls from Prairie Avenue south to Mullen Avenue. Along with this, in 2023 to 2025, we have the Highway 41 I-90 interchange. This will remove and replace the existing bridges over Highway 41 and construct the second, what's anticipated to be the second spewey in North Idaho. There will be intersection modifications along State Highway 41 from Celtice Way up to Mullen Avenue, including the reconstruction of State Highway 41. The project cost is estimated at $46.5 million, and when it's all said and done, this is kind of what it should look like. It's an offset spewey. We push the intersection to the north side of I-90. City staff is working with ITD closely on this project, and right now ITD is in the preliminary design phases. They're hoping to have late this fall or early winter the next public open house to discuss this preferred alternative. Moving a little bit further west, State Highway 53. ITD has a number of projects to address safety and capacity in the area. First, there are some intersection changes where they are going to be widening State Highway 53 and putting some wider shoulders from the state line or between Hauser Lake Road and Bus Road. They will be installing turn bays and providing illumination at the intersections for increased safety. There's also plans for an interchange happening at Pleasant View Road and State Highway 53. This will provide a grade separation of Pleasant View Road over the Union Pacific. That's over the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad, not the Union Pacific Railroad, and a grade separation over State Highway 53. Right now, the anticipation is that it will be a tight diamond interchange. That means you get up to the top, there'll be lights on each side of it, and you'll be in fairly close to the roadway. That project will also require the closure of McGuire Road and Beck Road intersections with State Highway 53. That's anticipated for 2026 construction. You're looking at, for all three of those projects, $33.4 million, with a bulk of that being the Pleasant View interchange. All right, so quickly went over a bunch of capacity and safety projects. There's a few still out there, as well as a couple maintenance items. I'm not going to go into much depth on those in consideration of your time. We do have the Meyer Road and Bocal safety and capacity improvements, $1.8 million scheduled for 2023. Idaho Street and Union Pacific Railroad crossing, putting in gates and lights for $0.3 million in 2023. Prairie Avenue and Idaho Street traffic signal with an estimated cost of $0.9 million scheduled for 2021. One change on that. Recently, it was identified by Post Falls Highway District that a roundabout was more cost-effective and would be a safer alternative. They're anticipating that that project is going to be somewhere between $1.2 and $1.4 million now. It's still substantially less expensive than what the signal option was. State Highway 53 and Ramsey Road will be installing a traffic signal to address both safety and capacity needs at a cost of $2.1 million, scheduled for 2022. Chase Road and the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad Spur. This is a project we have, $0.5 million. It's under preliminary for construction. Design dollars become available in 2021. Post Falls Highway District has a number of guardrail and other safety improvements along Riverview Drive at $0.3 million scheduled for next year in 2020. Prairie Avenue and Greens Ferry traffic signal currently under construction and at a cost of $0.9 million for that project. One thing to just raise your attention to, that intersection will be closed effective this Friday for about a week. So alternative routes are highly suggested. Post Falls Highway District is recommending for east-west travel to utilize Hayden Avenue, and for north-south traffic to utilize either Idaho Street or State Highway 41. Prairie Avenue and Pleasant View Roundabout, it's a safety and capacity project with a cost of $1.5 million and to be constructed next year. I-90 Northwest Boulevard signal upgrades, $0.1 million, 2020. I-90 Sherman Avenue signal upgrades, $1.1 million, 2021. And the last construction project is I-90 widening at the Atlas Bridge to provide an additional off-ramp at Northwest Boulevard and to start to make accommodations and preparation for widening of I-90 in the beyond 7-year time frame, $12.3 million, 2026 construction. Quickly on maintenance issues, continually ITD is needing to maintain I-90 to keep it a safe and functioning roadway for 65 and 70 mile per hour traffic. That means regularly marking the pavement, keeping culverts safe, addressing guardrails and other safety issues. Estimated cost over the next 6 years is $1.3 million. Within that number is a little bit high for what's going on in Kootenai County because the striping costs per year actually were from Washington state line to the Montana state line. I could not break that out. Spokane Street Bridge, Post Falls Highway District is going to be doing an overlay in 2023 and making some improvements to the cathodic protection to keep that a safe access point, $3.4 million. Then we have the Beck Road overlay from Celtice Way up to Prairie Avenue at a cost of $2.1 million. That's just to improve the pavement surface that's out there and to make some widening on the shoulders for safety. And then I-90 Pennsylvania overpass over in Coeur d'Alene, cost of $11.4 million to remove the existing structures and replace them. This is a small start, but it is helping address both the safety as well as capacity issues in the area. I stand for any questions you might have.
Thanks, Rob. That was a quick presentation, and if you add in the millions of dollars you just talked about in minutes, it was pretty high.
And you've got to remember, this is just what's got federal and state funding to it. The developers in the area, the local jurisdictions as well as us are putting in a lot of money to also address capacity and safety needs as quickly as we can within the budgets that we have.
Appreciate it.
When you showed the new intersection of I-90 and Celtice and
Yes.
41, it looks like 41 continues on and it'll run into Hebron then?
So
Is it rerouted to that, past the Department of Labor, right through there?
this one here?
Yeah.
So
Labor's over by 3.
Hairborn, which is
Yeah,
right
Hairborn
here.
will lead, yeah.
Hairborn is going to lead right into Celtice Way and then into State Highway 41.
Okay, so that'll be the main street then instead of
That
Ross
will be the
Point.
main street, and that is an area where we are working with ITD and taking a closer look. Mr. Flowers noticed they had some traffic counters out. That was part of the state's counting program, which will help this project, but also for the state numbers, but that will help us better identify what needs to be done at 3rd Avenue and Ross Point Road, as well as at Ross Point Road and Celtice Way to accommodate bicycle as well as vehicular traffic. Mr. Wolfe?
So is this a wish list that you just presented?
No, these are, all the projects that were shown to you are on the state, or on the Kootenai Metropolitan Transportation Plan. The funding is obligated for those projects.
Cool.
The years are pretty good. What can happen, and we've found this with our own projects at times, is we can get a project moved up if we are diligent on doing our work and someone else in the state falls behind on their project. Suddenly, a couple $1 million might show up and you can move a project up faster.
Good stuff.
Thank you, Rob.
You're welcome.
I'll be talking to you. I want copies of those slides, but I'll talk to you about that.
We will email a copy of the slides to everyone, so.
Perfect. Next item is mayor comments, and I have none. Council comments.
I have one. Go, Kerri.
Go ahead, Kerri.
Real quick, even though there's probably no one here anymore. On Thursday, Post Falls Senior Center chili cook-off, 5:30 to 7:30, and it benefits the Meals on Wheels program, so that's a good one. Have dinner there, support Meals on Wheels. Saturday, you don't have to cook either. Go to the Post Falls Historical Society spaghetti feast and cakewalk, Saturday 4 to 7. And that's at the Kootenai County Fire and Rescue Training Center there.
Thank you.
There's 2 nights you don't have to cook.
Linda?
I just wanted to thank the city for their participation in the Lantern Festival that was down at the park. For those who didn't get to come, it was really moving. It was very beautiful. I look forward to seeing it happen again, so I know that some of the guys from the Parks Department were there helping, and it was just really, really nice.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So we do need an executive session, not to last longer than
45 minutes.
time out.
Move
Let's
to-
get a no vote real quick.
Move to enter into executive session pursuant Idaho Code 74-2061A to consider hiring a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual agent. Further, that no action will be taken and that the session will last no more than 15 minutes.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Thoreson.
Aye.
Wolfe.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Anthony.
Aye.
Borders.
Aye.
And Wilhelm.
Aye.
Motion passed. We'll enter executive session.
I
Those
wanted to
45 minutes would
negotiate
change to
that
firing.
warrant.
Call the meeting back to order. Is there any motion to come forward?
Adjourn.
All those in favor? Aye. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
That was fast.
It's a long night.